Ellis, final thoughts. History is unreliable, isn't it? History isn't ever really what happened. Over the course of my time here, I've come to understand that more and more that nothing can truly replicate first-hand experience. And if you were ever to meet me, you would certainly get an impression. Unfortunately, all I can offer you now is a second-hand narrative, and whether you see me as the villain in this case will ultimately depend on what sort of person you are, how you see things. The experience any given document provides is unique to the individual. Just realized. Writing this down is useless, because they'll destroy it. What's the point if nobody is around to read it? I guess everything we create is like that. Everything is subject to time. Everything decays. The failure of my efforts here prove that. Entropy seems to be a true universal constant, a reliable friend that shoves your face in the mud. As much as we might not want to admit it, we all die, and there's a point sometime in the far future at which everything we did ultimately proves futile. I guess holding on to the past is one of the things which sets us apart from the apes, the sentimentality of it all. It's not practical, storing all this useless history. They say you learn from history, but when's the last time Hannibal crossing the Alps taught you jack shit as far as acquiring food or shelter was concerned? Still, we do it all the same. In the hopes that one infinitesimal nugget of the ultimate truth might be concealed away somewhere in there. A semi-spiritual falsehood. Why do we preserve things, or try to? If the sun will consume the earth, expand in a rapid ball of flame, and will probably be long extinct by then, why are we programmed, biologically, with this nagging desire, this incessant pursuit? What does it achieve? I'm still asking myself that while I type this. Flames are only growing and the wind outside is stronger than ever before. They're really close now. Walls can't keep them at bay this time. I can't deny that I am at fault, that somehow I failed. One decision I made didn't account for every contingency. Now it's all going to be lost. All of it. You're probably wondering who I am, how exactly I rose to prominence. I don't even know who I am anymore, really. All I know is that some force has carried me through this, changed me in several ways. What would I call this entity? Memory, maybe. Or maybe the mouth. Because its gaping maws consume all. It wants to eat. I carry its dinner in, shovelfuls of it, feed the monster. A hungry sponge, representative of that human drive, the universal desire for readily accessible knowledge. Then there's the angry mob, pitchforks and torches in hand. Or hands, plural. They want to destroy the monster. It's a relatively simple dynamic, really. I've dealt with all manner of rabble, human and otherwise. I've studied them, looked them in the eye, squared off against them for as long as possible. There is, however, as with all things, a breaking point, a pivotal moment. That pivotal moment is now. I write this on October 31st, 2022, and outside the others are gathering. Now, if you paid attention to anything you've read, you might have mistaken me for the archivist, that one and murderer who made headlines in the early 2000s for killing women along the Cherry Creek bike path and taking photographs of their mutilated bodies in the quest for some sort of twisted satisfaction, or hubris, or a combination of the two. That is only partially correct. I am the archivist, though the entity writing this did not kill those women, because I am many people and have taken many different names. I must clarify that much before they get me. In my quest for immortality, I have become immortal in the sense that there are an infinite number of varieties of Ellis here in the present, as well as in the past. The future, however, may be another matter, and it certainly isn't looking great, for any of us. I'm crazy, you're saying? Off my rocker? Well, maybe I am. Have you considered that having thousands, no, millions of consciousnesses compressed into one fragile calcium container will have an effect on someone? Has anyone ever given me the time of day? Shelby, I know you're in one of the adjacent rooms, and you'll burn as much as I do when this tea kettle boils, which won't be long now. You're destined for the same fate as I am, always have been, probably. How does that feel, dear Shelb? You and your condescension, your sense of being above it all. How many times I felt the urge to choke the life out of you and rid this world once and for all of your slut behavior, you can't imagine. But I held back. No, No. That's the archivist talking. Pay him no mind. He doesn't matter anymore, I don't matter either. I've been through 100 incarnations at the epicenter of all things, reading beneath the underpass in a Mobius cycle that note I wrote for myself. Always telling myself that killing those women wouldn't further my life, that I wouldn't be able to harness their energy to feed the mouth, that it was unsustainable. And every time I disregarded my own advice, and this is the end result. Not only the end result for who I am now, might I add. I believe this to be the end of us all. Valerie, a word on Valerie. I can't even remember what she looked like. That's how long it's been since I saw any of them. That's what I've been trying to remember, that the more time you spend recording your family, the less time you actually spend with them, as an active participant. It's a trade we all make. Why I must be persecuted for this decision, a consensual choice on my part, I really have no idea. Cruel justice, twisted fate, if one of us were so vile, why must we all be exterminated? Because I am a threat to them. I'm a penny on the railroad tracks, a detriment to progress, to unceasing change, a small dust particle gumming up the cogs of the cosmic clock. And until tonight, I have kept them at bay. But time stops for no one. And it's my time now. You hear that? Of course you can't hear it. But the sound has been made all the same, never to be recorded on any tape or device, never to be heard by any human ear save my own. I forgot what that was like, almost to have a unique and irreplicable experience. It's the noise they make when their disgusting coats drag on the dirt road. Slithering, gasping through those orifices they call mouths. I shouldn't have dragged Jav into this, if I have one regret that's it. Should have bought a calculator and done all the work myself. I would have sacrificed hours if it meant Jav was okay right now. But Jav isn't okay. He's spontaneously combusted. I walked in on him tonight, pencil to his lip, he appeared to be stuck on something. Still clattering away at those keys, and when he saw me enter he stopped for a moment and looked up at me, and I thought I could make out his eyes from behind those sunglasses he always insists on wearing, though it may have been merely a trick of the light. Jav said he wore them because his retinas were sensitive, and whenever he took them off during a bright day it caused him headaches. So he slunk around in here like a bat in a subterranean grotto, among the piles and stacks of paperwork. I put sheets over the windows, turned the intensity of his monitor down 90%. There's something different tonight, he said. I remember this bit distinctly. Calm before the storm, that's what they call it. It's so quiet out here, no wind and no crows and the hills way off. Went outside to take a look at sundown, There were lights out there. I couldn't stomach to tell him, even then, in the throes of death, what I'm telling you right now, which was wrong on my part. I liked Jav, he was a good scout. Gave his all to this organization, out of all the workers under my watch he was the only one really dedicated to keeping the enterprise afloat. I should have told him, even if it meant him getting upset, even if it meant him accusing me of holding things back. What kind of lights? I asked, knowing full well what kind of lights they were. It was All Hallows Eve, the night of the dead, when the boundary between realms is ever more pronounced. Down south in Boulder, jack-o'-lanterns were carved and the wail of the otherworldly was carried on sour wind. No wind here, of course. Only the noise Jav's pencil made tapping the desk. He was jittery. They were like the 7 lights, he whispered. 7 lights on the Black Hills. Come again? I was tired at this point, exhausted from weeks of paperwork. The sheriff still gave me a strange look whenever I drove into town for supplies, even if the Carlisle case had been dropped and we had been determined exempt from responsibility. The stress alone from the mountains of forms and legal hassle was enough of a punishment. It's from a book I read, he murmured in a strange drawl. Long time ago, must have been 15. I can't place the name of it, it was a weird book. About the end of the world, the ultimate destiny of humanity. They all gathered in this megastructure, a towering pyramid, and waited for the inevitable. The extinguishment of all life. They just sat around, complacent, while the fabric of reality fell apart and the danger grew, steadily. The inevitable, Ellis. As he said this, the sheet on the window directly above his desk fell and I could make out the nocturnal landscape, the billowing tufts of vegetation, coated in a thick twilight haze. "You should read less," I told him, and then I shut the door and walked back to my office. And I knew that if he died, he would die in ignorance. Ignorance was preferable to knowledge, I reasoned. Knowledge of what they were capable of. Better to die in euphoric oblivion than to die knowing that you could have prevented your own death with better utilization of said knowledge. The clock on the wall had stopped, and I changed the batteries, but to no avail. The hands read 9:19, and I knew that this was also an ill portent. Even the familiar ticking of the timepiece had left, and the claustrophobic quiet set in. Not so much as footsteps in the hallway, no noise from Shelby or Dan, despite their being here. We were all caught in our own separate bubbles, because as every great strategist knows, you must divide the enemy before conquering. They had really thought this through. Time had stopped, I realized, gazing at my desk and the broken clock. Time did stop, at least for me. Peals of laughter. Laughter without reverberation, without echo, a noise which died down as soon as it erupted, and within seconds it was gone. As the night continued, my security was gradually stripped away. They knew how to do it, to make their presence known and their anger apparent, though in ways which stifled the soul, ruined perception. My desk seemed to quiver, ever so slightly, and the walls had an effect where they looked as if they were caving in, like those old traps in the adventure serials, though they were actually steady. I dipped down to my file cabinet where I always keep a bottle of Jameson handy. Poured myself one shot, then another, although the burning sensation in my throat didn't make me any more aware of my surroundings. Was Valerie right to leave me? No, she wasn't. I was a casual drinker, had one beer at the football game and another at the wedding, and because of this she thought she was too good for me, and she assumed blindly, like the fool she was, that leaving me would afford me a period of self-reflection. It didn't. Without her I only nursed the bottle more. Not enough to create what I am today, no, that has to do with who I am internally, who I've always been. The whiskey played no part, really. I have to believe that. My eyes teared up and I wiped at them with the sleeve of my jacket, and my nose was hot. It had been a stupid idea, I realized. The room kept fading regardless. In and out it went, like someone had snuffed a candle, as if the curtains had gone down on the scene right before the cast entered and the play began. What would it be? The conqueror worm? Ha ha. More laughter. Without thinking of the end result, I gazed down at my hands, which had developed wrinkles, and clenched the edge of my desk with vitriol. They were devoid of blood, pale and distant, and as I continued staring at them they multiplied thricefold, one hand with an unusual amount of hair on the back, one with a decidedly feminine appearance, and my own in the middle. They expanded upon themselves in an intricate geometric pattern, and if I cocked my head ever so slightly they would rotate in response. Screaming from Jav's office. I didn't even know Jav could make a noise like that, all the marrow in his bones having congealed. A rictus screech which permeated the walls and housing, caused me to knock my shot glass onto the floor, whereupon it evaporated into a crystal dust. I fumbled with the handle on the door, tripped over my feet en route to his enclave. The room was quiet from the outside, only the sound of his wall clock, slowly counting down the minutes and seconds to our mutually assured destruction. I paused, hesitated, tried making up some excuse for myself as to why I shouldn't take a gander past the frame, knowing full well what lay inside. But things like that don't really worry me anymore, at least not as much as they used to, and there was no reason he should be any different. He was only a sack of flesh. As I presumed, what had been Jav was now a mutilated sheet of cartilage and organs strewn across every square inch of his former workspace. Both kidneys thrown haphazardly onto his keyboard, his face somehow even more disturbing without those cheap shades on, eyes clawed clean from their sockets but still staring right ahead at me, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw how they had taken most of his skin from his back and draped it over the monitor. They really had done a neat job on him. Shit, I thought aloud to myself, and rammed my knuckles against the wood. We are all done. Toast? I whirl around and Shelby and Dan are standing there, eyes wide. Shelby is digging her nails into her palm and Dan's right hand is clenched around her left. Her bottom lip is quivering ever so slightly, matching in perfect time the undulations of the pendulum on Javier's wall-mounted timepiece. "I can explain," I said, putting my hands up, neat little smirk. Already my shirt is coated in bloodstains from the aura of guts permeating the place, red mist has arisen from the cadaver, and the first signs of decay are setting in, creating a real stench. They both look as if they're a million miles away, and they probably are, because to see me like this, in this state, drunk out of my mind and standing before the disemboweled remnants of my former colleague, yet with the same casual indifference I always maintain, they must find me a particularly sociopathic gremlin, devoid of a human temperament. "There's nothing to explain," says Dan. "We want out. Now." "Fine," I say, waving them away. "Just leave. I'll deal with this by myself. I've got to." "The front door is locked," Shelby interjects. "Back door, too. You locked us in here, so we're asking you very nicely, we are asking you as politely as we possibly can to unlock the doors." There are tears welling up in her eyes, her voice is wavering somewhat and she's making fists. The last thing I need right now is an outburst from either of them, or panic. Panic is what the enemy thrives off. Chaos is what feeds it. With a nimble step, I slam the door to Jav's office and put my arms around both their waists, ushering them a safe distance from the carnage. "Be quiet," I say, as the overhead lighting flickers on and off. "They can hear you if you give in to irrational apprehension." I never locked the door. I swear. Both of them are speechless, frozen like ice figures at a winter carnival, and I'm stumbling over my words, trying as best as possible to explain just how messy things are going to get, how screwed we all are, as a group, as martyrs to the cause. Part of it's the whiskey, the other part is merely my poor oratory capabilities. Just as I am about to launch into a diatribe which neither of them really want to hear, I am interrupted by a faint chime, way out in the furthest recesses of the building. It's the doorbell. Shelby breaks from my grasp before I can catch her, screaming at the top of her lungs. She probably assumes it's the police or an erstwhile pizza delivery. I and Dan race after her, and Shelby, being the hapless idiot that she is, an idiot I foolishly entrusted with petabytes of information, records of things of interest to all humanity, backups of those and backups of those backups, in one fell swoop she jiggles the handle and opens Pandora's box, letting them all inside, letting every last one of them to complete their foul work. She is the contingency. They're all invisible to the naked eye right now, of course. In their place there's a small trick-or-treater standing on the stoop, a peculiar sight given hygiene's remote location. At 10 feet away, I am 90% sure it is not human. At 5 feet, witnessing the thing's placid, all-knowing response to Shelby's unhindered screaming, I am 100% certain. She pauses for a moment, stops screaming, lifts her hand to her jaw and looks out at the night visitor. It's clad in shabby blue denim, an archetype made manifest. It's wearing a mannequin mask without features, displays no emotion, no personality, virtually no sentience. It merely stands there, on the threshold, pail full of glistening candy clenched in its disturbingly small little gloved hands, and behind it the fields of the street Vrain Valley blow and whisper in muted tones, and the telephone wires above hum ever so faintly beneath the sprawling canvas of starlight. "Trick or treat," it said. I slammed the wooden slab in its cold face, scrambled to yank the metallic keyring from my pocket and inserted it into the slot. Shelby had been knocked back by the force of my movements, which were spontaneous and loose. Dan was desperately attempting to make a call to the outside world on his cell phone, but the screen only displayed an image of 2 fluorescent eyes and a sharp grin. He yelped, tossed it to the floor where it made a resounding thud, and backed away from it. "Okay," I said, running my fingers through my hair. "Shelby, you've just let them in. That thing out there, it's one of them, I'm sure of it. You can't leave. You hear me? You can't leave, because if you do they'll kill me. We fight to the end." Shelby was sobbing endlessly into her elbow, and Dan, being the soft milquetoast he is, rushed over to console her. I stood firm and scouted the immediate vicinity, poking my head out like a tortoise. "Let them in," shouted Dan, his neck tendons on full display. "Ellie, who are they?" "There's you and there's me and there's her. That's it. Unlock that goddamn door or I am going to beat you up and kick my way out if I have to. He raised one fist, and I nonchalantly strolled over to a desk and picked up one of the VHS tapes. Okay, let me explain this. Deep breath, clock ticking. The outside you're seeing out there is not outside. It's actually inside. Inside this. I held the tape up, flashed it from face to face, yet neither of them seemed to recognize what I was talking about. I sighed. Had I been too obfuscatory? All Hallows Eve, I continued. Halloween. You know what it is. It's an occasion which we, as a species, have collectively agreed serves as a conduit between the living and the dead. Tonight, of all nights, I had hoped we could just come here, sit down, do our work, spend the night, have some idle chatter in my office. Hell, I even had some scary movies planned that we could watch, if we all got our work done. But we haven't been getting our work done, have we? We haven't been as efficient, no. Because you know, and I know, we all in the back of our minds acknowledge, that something is different about tonight. And that's where they derive their power from the collective unconscious. You're crazy, objected Dan. You are insane. Let us by. That's not a real highway, Dan. I shouted, pointing with one shaky finger out the window. It might look like it, sure. But it's only a recording. I'm not sure of what. The highway how it was in 1992, or 1994, or newer, maybe it's digital. Didn't get a good enough look at it. Point being, you can no longer trust what you're seeing, because they're inside. They've made it past the containment field. At this term, Shelby looked up from her mucus episode. Containment field? She bawled. Ellis, what are you talking about? That voice. Like nails on a chalkboard. Coming from that scrawny, makeup-covered larynx. I resisted the glistening temptation to wrap my fingers around her vocal cords and once and for all put her out of her misery. It was installed by the old staff, I muttered. Dan, you remember that thing you found? Out by Highway 36? Last September? The lights above us started letting out strange micro noises, barely imperceptible unless one were to listen closer, and if one did listen closer, it created a feedback loop of amplification. I have no idea what you're even saying, he said, trembling frantically. Ellis, you let us out. No, I said. The barrier is made out of that thing, Dan. Designed by experts. And tonight, of all nights, your girlfriend had to open it like an idiot, and now we're all dead. Who knows, Dan? We probably died 5 minutes ago, for all we know. We're on a ghost ship now, voyage of the damned. Who grabbed the tape, forcefully smacked it against the table, where the plastic housing snapped in half, the gray reels within sputtered and spiraled to the floor in a butterfly cascade. Didn't even know I was capable of that level of strength. I'm not his girlfriend, she said, audibly choking up. I'm not yours. I work here, and I've been here since the beginning, and all I've ever received is a thank you for my efforts without which, I might add, we'd be gone well over a year before tonight our dirty glances and harassment. She wiped her nose, her tears had smudged her lipstick and she resembled a cursed painting lit ablaze. Whoa there, I snickered, backing up into a corner. Looks like it's someone's time of the month, huh? I was well and truly beyond these events, watching them like a spectator at a baseball game, really without agency. If this were an inevitability, then nothing could be altered, and everything I said was not of my own volition. I have to believe that. Have to try. You are a sad, sick little excuse for a person, she barked, her voice building like rumbling thunder, like the din on the horizon right before a downpour. I would feel sorry for you, Ellis. I would. You lost your family, your job, everything you cared about. But I'm not your wife. Dan isn't your son. You don't have a family. Ellis. You're dead. You died a long time ago, you're a ghost in everything but name. Her eyes flickered, glowing like distant candles in the encroaching darkness. Could she be? I didn't wait. Hesitancy would only lead to further regret. I picked up the destroyed spools of tape off the carpet and in one smooth reflex motion wrapped them tightly around that thin, frail neck of hers, made sure to loop the tape to the extent that it would be broken, one circuit, then two, then seven. And her eyes began to water and a trail of saliva formed at the corner of her mouth. Dan bolted towards us both, picked up some scissors from the corner of the desk and began cutting Shelby loose from her magnetic death. I smoothly bent down to grab one half of the broken plastic housing, and with one smooth motion I sliced through the flesh of his face like a chef's knife through butter. He screamed once, a loud, feminine noise, jumped back, and collapsed into a miserable pile on the far side of the room, holding the gash I had given him as the blood thoroughly soaked his tacky retro jacket, the one he always wore for whatever reason. This completed, I gingerly removed the spool from Shelby's neck, placed both the tape and housing onto the desk, and shoved her limp body onto the floor beside Dan. At that moment, the lights turned off. I was feeling the effects of the drink now, the golden mental haze, the static, the distortion. Could barely stand on my own 2 feet, lights switching on and off, noises beyond the threshold growing. All quiet on the Western Front, I muttered softly under my breath, holding the table to keep my legs sturdy and prevent myself from vomiting what was left of the whiskey. Outside, thunder brewed, an atmospheric tea kettle on to boil. I guess not. I moved over to the window and there was some sort of vortex forming above the mountains, their dark outline framed by a skyward whirlpool of gray filth, concentric circles, which remained suspended a few thousand meters above the ground yet sent long, wispy tendrils of ash and fog onto the plains, billowing over each other successively. From the center of the turbulence, snares of jet yellow lightning could faintly be made out. I guess I'll tell you all a little story, I said, pulling up a nearby chair and sitting directly in front of Dan's weeping husk. That's what captains do when their ships sink, I assume. Tell stories to assuage the crew of the horrors that lie beneath in the murky depths. Well, except for the Titanic, I suppose. They had a band. But we don't have a band. I notice a nasty gash on my left palm. Wonder how it got there. Maybe Shelby did it and I'm incapable of feeling pain anymore. I've mentioned her in passing, you both know what she was like, I continue. I have a special collection of her tapes, hidden in the cellar. Never let either of you see it, for obvious reasons, because if you saw it you'd probably call the police. But I taped her all the time. Going to work, walking around. Sometimes I'd park outside her office after dropping the kids off at school, and just point the trusty old camcorder right up at her. I went to all this effort because I suspected she may have been cheating on me. Needed evidence to file the divorce papers. Needed justification, needed real hard stuff. So 24/7, while she wasn't aware of it, I was filming her. Even had a miniature setup installed while we slept, just so I knew she wasn't getting up in the middle of the night and sneaking out. Slight giggle rises in the back of my throat, work hard to suppress it. Trust, that's the key, it dawns on me. The ability of one party not to question the motives or biases of another party. That's what I do. That's what recording does, it removes falsehoods, improves trust. You might say we didn't have enough trust in our relationship, that she was dishonest with me and I was secretive with her. I had to be secretive. I had to know I could trust her. The same way you can trust me, guys. Trust is important. Always has been, for the operation of this place. Honor system and all that. Dan looks close to bleeding out completely. There's a massive puddle oozing from his face, which is hidden in his slumped figure. Dear Shelby, meanwhile, lies passively on the floor. I consider going over to her, making sure she's out, but stupidly I refuse. That may have been my last option to avoid what came. So one day, I'm camped out there, I refrain, parked in the usual spot. She worked in Lodo. I'm a few stories down, just chilling in the family station wagon with the trusty cam pointed at a direct angle to where I can see her whole layout. And the whole time I'm so apprehensive, because I know the other man is going to walk in and start making out with her. Something about this one day in particular just kinda hit different. I didn't really know what to expect from this mystery man. I imagined he'd be blonde, muscular, well-built, square jawline, maybe. But that wasn't what happened. I sat out there for around an hour, the occasional pedestrian giving me some weird looks every now and again, but I just kept on. Right when my hiatus is about to run out, she crosses over to a certain corner of the room, out of sight. And she pops back into frame around 15 seconds later, carrying a TV. She set the TV up on her desk, then from the folds of her skirt she pulled out a VHS tape. Now, for me, this was aberrant behavior, considering she had never expressed even so much as a passing interest in this stuff. But she holds up the tape and turns it over, really considers it. After around a minute, she popped it in. Screen lights up, she flicks off the lights and pulls the shades down. Luckily for me, my camcorder came with a zoom, so I pushed it to its limit, trying to get the picture behind the cracks. And what I saw, brief glimpses of it, oh boy, what I saw is the sort of thing that I think is grounds for a divorce. She's sitting in front of the TV, and staring into that all too familiar aquamarine abyss, hands folded on her lap, clenched ever so slightly. A picture of me flashes onto the screen, in vibrant living color. It's an old picture, from our honeymoon in Pitomel. I'm standing in front of the tripod, and she's next to me, waving gently. Behind us I could just make out the rising crests of the Spanish peaks, which manifest as light twin blobs. Val stares into this portrait, this living memory, this preserved moment, and it does something to her neurochemistry, something I doubt I'll ever fully understand. Right before she went in, the camcorder's battery sputtered out, rendering this one of the only pieces of Valerie I can't prove occurred. I was left to witness the unfathomable with only my eyes and memory to aid me. She began rubbing the TV, gently at first, then moved into a full embrace, the side of her head resting on top. Nudged her cheek against the screen, that warm static caressing her, light sparks causing her to smile as she gazed with a profound longing at the footage. The shot had now moved to a point where I was sitting on a rock and she was sitting on the ground next to me, and we were holding hands. I guess I had forgotten what it felt like, to hold her hand. I can only imagine that was somehow what she felt, in real time, as she pressed her nose and palms up against the simulacra, a warm feeling of the past, an irreplicable feeling, a sense of true contentment. She licked the screen. Licked it, I'm telling you, pressed her lips up against it and held on for dear life like a ship caught in a tempest, embraced that television set with every ounce of strength in her, showed it the kind of affection I don't think we had shown each other in half a decade. At this point, I was trembling with all kinds of thoughts, turned away from the window and tapped the steering wheel lightly. I had seen enough to know where I wasn't wanted. I was my own enemy, I concluded. I was the perfect man of her dreams, my past self was somehow superior to my present self, and I was the other man. A goddamn VHS tape of myself. Call me crazy, all you want, but I think that's about as cuckoo as it gets, kissing one of them. What happened to her? Dan asked feebly, slouched on the floor. I don't rightly know, Danny boy, pausing as I wander around the carnage I've wrought. Can't say for sure. Last letter I got from her was sometime around 2016. Think she's living somewhere up in the mountains, one of those small towns where I'm unlikely to find her. Not that I'd want to. Breckenridge, Alma, somewhere like that. And I'm better off for it. How could I possibly hope to accomplish all of this with her to worry about? Maybe you are better off for it, he says, giggling softly. Maybe this is where you belong, Ellis. Surrounded by your best friends and your all-important work, armed with your boundless intellect and your captivating humanity. You're right to ward off the monsters, you know. Keeping us safe like this, safe and secure from the truth. Cackles like a hyena, blood-stained hands making mobility difficult for him, sticking to the rug in some spots. That scar will last for the rest of his life, it's beginning to congeal but he's still in no state to get up. Glad to hear it. I yell, stepping on his knuckles with my full weight, producing an audible crunch. He screams once, grips it at the wrist, fingers all mangled as if he just arose from a car accident, tears streaming out of those bloodshot eyes. I can't even begin to imagine how much pain he's in at the moment. His scream sort of fills the room, but it doesn't matter. Nobody will hear, because nothing is outside. The archive is no longer a fixture on the earth as you or I might define it. You overestimate your own importance, I retort. I didn't hide their existence from you because your survival was vital. I hid their existence from you because I knew that if you learned about them, you would leave. And that can't happen. Especially not now. Need someone with me to spend the wee hours with. How's the quote go? Something about the weary and the damned. I stumble over to my rotating chair, wheel it over to where Dan is cowering and spin around a little. I can hear them, in the walls, their building noise creating a kind of all-consuming hiss. Ambient yet unmistakable. Wails in the mix, slow calls from beyond the threshold. Dan hears them, too, at least I think he does. He has too. How could anyone in their right mind deny that racket? The ground outside is now thoroughly coated in whirling static mist, and across the highway a hazy figure darts into the camouflage brush of thistleweeds and cattails on the border of the St. Vrain Creek. I can hear the creek, rushing along in the darkness, making its way through the rocks and gullies, splashing with vigor as if the mountain runoff were abnormally excessive. The figure is barely visible, perched on an outcropping roughly 50 meters out, well beyond the highway. One thing you do make, Danny boy, I lament, settling behind a table and turning the bloodied cassette fragment over and over in my hands. Good company. The first time I saw you, and this is why I chose you to keep the night watch, I thought, if he were alone here at 3 a.m., he'd still be nice to have around. And you are proving that. Just stay right there, wait until morning, and maybe we'll both be alright. Maybe, via some miracle, the sun rises and they leave, and we'll make it out without any scratches. Well, except for that one. That one will last a lifetime. So many grooves, so polished, well engineered, developed by only the best at JVC. Now, coated in the flaky scarlet life juice, it's scented with an iron tinge. It's a shame I had to break it to teach them a lesson about employee compliance, I think, while Dan just sits there motionless. Probably head trauma or something. I wouldn't know, I'm not a doctor. Sounds coming from the roof. My eyes dart upwards, trying to catch their pattern and frequency. How many of them are even now darting around with their arachnid methodology, ripping the shingles to bits, tearing other-sized holes in the infrastructure? I shudder as the sounds continue. Thumping, distant thuds from their shoes, light brushing sounds from those bristle-coated extremities. And the eyes, the piercing eyes which scan every room, trying to coax us out like vermin. I rush up and make sure the doors are locked. Yes, locked. Still there. Still in the upright bolted position, sigh of relief. I'm going to make it through. Going to be fine. They can't get in unless you let them in. I'm hoping she didn't let any of them in. Didn't see anything. Probably safe. Breath. You know what's funny? He murmurs after an indeterminate period of time. And I've been thinking about this for a while. Only 6 hours of footage fit onto a standard tape. And that's an extended play. All those security agencies that used to buy up all the tapes in bulk, also they could record onto them every single night, feed them into the CCTV cameras, keep them around for a month in case they would prove useful to law enforcement, and then re-record over them, or destroy them. Tapes couldn't even capture 24 hours of every day, 7 days of every week. What makes you think you can capture your entire life, much less the entire life of everyone who's ever lived? You haven't been doing that? I pause. We have a CCTV system. And lots of blank tapes you could have fed into it. Just to be sure. You were our first line of defense, you know. Or were, before tonight. Hell, no, he retorted, giggling slightly under his breath, bubbles of agony forming on the bottom lip. I use my intuition. My presence every night. I'm in the here and now, to borrow a phrase. I don't think I've ever used that CCTV system, Ellis. Not once. I'm too busy actually looking around the halls, actually inspecting signs of entry. Isn't that ironic, Ellis? I work here and I exist here, in the present. And I could care less about becoming like you, feeding tape upon tape into slot after slot for no goddamn reason. I throw the broken cassette at him and it hits him square in the jaw before clattering onto the rug in the pool of dried blood beneath his elbow. That seems to calm him down. You're starting to sound like them, Dan, I seethe. One of them. And believe me, after all we've been through tonight, I don't want to believe that. I want to stand here in solidarity with you. We represent humanity, Dan. We represent people. We stand on the side of curiosity and of research. We stand for what makes us Homo sapiens. Ever since the first little monkey started doodling his parents in the dirt in the Great Rift Valley 3 million years ago, we've been blessed with a curse. Memory retention. It's not fun, Dan. It's not fun, or enjoyable, or pleasant to retain memories of what you've done, what your ancestors have done, what messed up stuff has gone on during those 3 million years we've occupied this little barrel fragment. But we retain it all the same. Why? Why remember? I don't know, Dan. I yell at the ceiling. I really don't know why. It's like the act of creation, isn't it? Why do we create anything, as people? Why do we build monuments, paintings, temples, effigies, formations out of stone, knowing that they'll all crumble to soot and ash eventually? Creation and retention, both ultimately meaningless activities we occupy ourselves with, because our time here is finite and we need some busy work. Two sides of the same coin, pointless and futile, yet each in a headlock with the other. They heard it. Of course they did. Another thump, this time from upstairs. They've made it in. Inside the building, through the roof. On the third or second floor, can't really tell which. Why not take some pictures of her? What? I ask. My mind was momentarily elsewhere. That's what we do, isn't it? He gestures over toward her limp body. We take pictures. We take videos. Take a picture of Shelby's body, so everyone knows what you did here tonight. So the knowledge is laid bare, out in the open. Free access to information. That is what we do here, isn't it? I take a step back. Finger to the lip. Lost in contemplation, sounds coming from upstairs, restless, moving, writhing. Wouldn't work, I respond after a brief period. Everything is already gone. No more archive. But you remember, he says. I remember. I'm here, Ellis. You're here. We're both present. In the here and now. I want to see a photo of her before all this disappears or whatever you said was going to happen. One last photo, or video. Your choice. Or are you a hypocrite? What? No, Dan, honestly. You are, Ellis. He stands up, trembling on his feet. You claim you want to keep the past alive, yet you bury secrets. You can't do both, either you stand for complete transparency or you don't. Either you make everything public or you don't. These are the rules you've set up for yourself. I didn't make them. You've walled yourself into a corner. Take some photos of her dead body. Now. Be reasonable, I say, scampering off to retrieve the proper equipment. I'll do it. Just hold on a second. Dan's fists are balled up, looks like he's going to cry, and he's nearing me an inch at a time. Blood be damned, he's actually getting close. He could take me in a fight, I think. But that would only be if he were in the right state of mind. Can't be, with all that blood lost from his head. His brain is sputtering out, lights dimming and flickering behind his pupils. I dart around him holding the gray case. Here. And I pull out the camcorder. Load a fresh, brand new, never before opened high-8 tape into it, press the top and hear the gears rotate, and whereas it ejects, pop it in position, close it, listen to those gears click and whir, metal and plastic grinding together. Strap over the shoulder. Position myself right where Shelby's body would be, close my left eye and open my right, peer into the viewfinder. Clicking the button, it flashes on, a miniature monochromatic cinema. Stats in the corners, I point it around the room. At my chair. It makes a tiny, nearly inaudible click. Focus, fade. I point it at Dan. He's staring at me with those sunken pupils. Probably going to fall over into a heap at any moment. He arduously raises his hand. Waves hello for the camera. More focus. Crystal clear image. Turn it toward where Shelby is lying. Shelby isn't there. I inhale sharply, heart skips a beat, Lower the viewfinder. There she is. Rumpled skirt, ribbons of tape unfurling from around her neck, still not moving. Look back in the viewfinder. Gone. What's wrong? He asks. Is there a hint of awareness in his voice? Is he privy to something I'm not? Of course he is. She and him, they worked on this together. She knew what she was doing by opening the door to that little gremlin. He shrugs, his wound seems to have entirely coagulated by now and he's only barely groggy, coming out of the daze. Emerging from the long dark corridor, looks healthier now that he's standing on both feet and breathing into his lungs with a wide stance. It's impossible, I mutter under my breath. Look back in the camera, flip through all the settings, fade and adjust the dial. My left eye sees her body, my right eye sees the floor. The viewfinder is lying to me. Lying about what is immediately apparent in the physical world. My camcorder, the same I brought to my sister's wedding, to my wedding and to countless other events, one of the only friends I have left, has become as unreliable and treacherous as my poor delusional employees. Trembling, I set it back down onto the desk. Look at it with a fear-soaked gaze, wistful and longing, as if the only tether which had been holding me to this mortal plane has been unceremoniously severed with a rusty pair of pruning shears. With one fell swoop I bring my fists down onto the device, lean my forearm in where it catches the viewfinder right in the joint, and it releases an impressive shower of white-hot sparks which I recoil from, screaming as all those intricately crafted pieces release themselves from the housing, and the motor, which had still been running, sputters until it transforms into a mighty blaze which engulfs the lower left section of the desk in a terrifying bonfire. The overhead lights flicker off, droning to a crawl. Dan remains still, his facial muscles made taut and eerie in the low night, as the fire continues and the pervasive scent of burning metal increases. We stand at opposite ends, the uncontrolled chaos the only barrier between one of us ripping out the other's guts. I asked you a question. What's wrong? Nothing. You wouldn't understand. Maybe I would, at least to a certain extent, he smirks, crossing his arms. Suppose your camera has been giving you an inaccurate picture of events as they happened. Suppose your perception, the way in which you assimilate information, has been distorted from the moment you set foot here, or long before that. Not just your camera. Your eyes, your ears. How can you trust what happens anymore? Sweat rolls down my forehead, causes my sprig to droop ever so slightly, mats of hair clustering together on my skin. Argyle fabric on my arms starts to become abrasive and claustrophobic. You trust recorded media, he reiterates. Still in obvious pain, though trying to deny it. Say you can't trust it. Say they have the ability to alter it, Ellis. Say they have the ability to make you see things that aren't there, imitate people, take shape and form and pull themselves out of the void, out of the dark caverns of fear, will themselves manifest. He takes one weak, half-hearted step toward me, and in response I hit the desk with the palm of my left hand. Damn right. Comes the growl from my lips. They can do that and more, Dan. You've been blind not to notice what they've been up to. They get inside your head, Dan. Maybe my perception is screwed 6 ways to Sunday right now, this very moment. It doesn't matter because they exist. I know they exist. He's backed me into a corner now. Metaphorically, not literally. You can't know anything if you can't trust your own perception, arrives the expected retort. Say I'm one of them. The real Dan was never here tonight, he had an errand to run and passed out from exhaustion. I snuck in here, Shelby said hi. Fooled her, convinced you. What if that's the case? Are you going to kill me? Go ahead. He spreads his arms and raises his neck, giving me ample room to cut it open, releasing a torrent of blood. I'm too fatigued myself to move from my position. Analyze him, very carefully. Up and down. Get all the features. The eyes. Something dark about the eyes, pale and glinting with an unnatural opacity. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Oxygen to the brain? Need no clutter, but the fire is still consuming the desk and the heat is growing. You're bluffing, I whisper. Not one of them. Screw you, Dan. Liar. Thought I would fall for that. A wave of my arm and Dan seems to fade back into the darkness, into the dusty stacks of tomes behind the growing onslaught of licking flames which has now separated the desk into two pieces which clatter without fanfare onto the carpet. The carpet catches on fire. The carpet is extremely flammable. You're right, Ellis. I'm not one of them. Because they don't exist. I preemptively whirl around and see Shelby, standing with unwieldy confidence, tape completely unwound from her neck and dangling from her grasp like a tassel in the breeze. Embers frame her as a thing to be reckoned with, an unavoidable obstacle. Her irises glitter in joyous malcontent, the corners of her carnelian lips drawn into a wild grin of immense pleasure. "Hi," she croons. "Remember me?" Those polished demon nails grip my ears, create tangible indentations on the oracles. She thrusts me headlong into the gathering orange light, and I take a deep breath in, try to resist her strength, yet despite my vigor she overpowers me, nears me ever closer to the heat, the 100-degree air choking me, breathing in smoke and dust from the ashen remains of the camcorder, surrounded on the blazing polyester rug by all the cogs and various metallic components which composed it. You've probably wondered what it feels like to come in direct contact with open flame. You've seen a candle burning, a stovetop going, and you've mulled the possibility over in your head about how it'd be to immerse yourself in that chemical reaction, of your own volition, of course. To pinch the flame, lightly tease it, and then, if the sensation were too intense, to recoil and get some ice on it. But you want to know. You want to know because we require a fundamental understanding of a given experience to fully plumb the depths of it and, if necessary, avoid it in the future. We pursue this end even to our own detriment. My face wasn't entirely prepared for the 2,000-degree onslaught dear Shelb subjected me to. I could feel the border of the flame, and then the very heart of it, the eye of the storm, the loss of sensation in my cheeks, the incomprehensible agony as my tongue became swollen from complete immersion, my skin losing all its moisture in a matter of seconds. There is a point, I believe, at which pain cannot be described in terms the average person is likely to understand, a threshold so high that, much like infinity, it defies comprehension or serious analysis. There was a slight popping sound as my left eyeball became engulfed and spilled over with a tablespoon of vitreous body. Unable to withstand the pressure anymore, I made every effort to hurl myself away from the fire, and it remotely seemed at that same moment Shelby herself decided I had enough and eased her grip. We both flew backward, with most of my clothes still burning. I flailed around like a salmon, trying by any means necessary to make the pain stop and deprive the remaining flames of their precious oxygen, though with the vision of my left eye completely removed it was a difficult endeavor. "We have to leave, Ellis," she screamed. "Give us the keys. Now." I made a feeble attempt from my lowly position on the floor to reach up to her collar, grab her and maybe throw her into the fire, but my muscles didn't seem to be cooperating with the signals my brain sent. All over were the marks of scars and burns, 3rd degree by the looks of them. My tissue had become a barren pocked wasteland of scarlet agony. Slight whimper from my throat. The top of the room was filling up fast with smoke, the only window looking out onto the street Vrain Creek blocked by a massive bookshelf which had toppled over sometime during the brawl. Dan coughs pensively into his elbow, desperately looking at Shelby, who shrugs at him and begins rifling through my pockets frantically like a maniac for that elusive keyring, the only device capable of ensuring their freedom from this slow demise. "Ellis," Dan repeats, firm yet crisp into my ear. "Give us the key." Shelby's nimble digits rifle through my jacket and she hears a faint jingling sound, a beacon of hope amid the crackle and hiss of the imminent amber death. Exploring further upon my person, she retrieves the key, holds them up to make sure they're real, breathes out what is either a sigh of desperate relief or an attempt to rid her lungs of that foul methane and asbestos cacophony, the same one which filled my nostrils and undoubtedly filled Dan's. My vision was going fast by now, darkness setting in, small blind spots which grew and melded, yet I could see Shelby's arm wrap around Dan's. They staggered toward the front door and leaned on each other, used each other as walking sticks. In that moment I wondered why it was that, after all these years, all these trials and tribulations, I had nobody to lean on. Dan rubbed his face, Shelby caressed her neck, both surprised by their respective injuries. She raised the keyring, hit home in the latch, and then Dan grabbed the handle and twisted it, wide open, fresh night air, stars and the moon gleaming above. Both step out onto the first step. Darkness. I don't know if they escaped. Don't know where they are now, like to think I imagine that part, they'll suffocate in here with me. But the more I think about that, the more I manage to convince myself that they did get out, and that there won't be any escape for me. When I came to it was several hours later. From the look of things, most of the room had been disheveled aside from the door, which now had a toppled bookcase leaning across it. The fire had mostly gone out, a section of the ceiling had collapsed in on itself, and the roof was leaking with the remnants of nocturnal mist. It was freezing, save the small outcroppings of fire scattered around here and there, real autumn weather setting in. Early morning of November 1st. You probably know the feeling of foreboding you get in certain places. A kind of malignant presence, all-consuming and unexplainable. Not a ghost, not a sentient entity. A feeling that something very wrong has gone on here, irreversibly wrong and undefinable, yet unquestionably evil. These were the attributes I can assign to this pseudo-archive, the broken mirror image of what had been. The sun hadn't yet risen, and everything was coated in a thick layer of pale blue. With the strength of a racehorse, I rose to stand and to test the door. Of course it was locked. Of course she had locked it, she would have known it could be locked from the inside. Of course. I'm so tired, even as I write this, every muscle in agony, screaming for rest. Yelling to be let go. But I can't leave. Even with the left eye socket completely devoid of terrestrial sight, I still see things out the corner of it every now and again, little flashes of white. Little blips. A summons from beyond, perhaps. I stumbled around the wreckage for a half hour or more. No escape, of course all the exits had been carefully obstructed by them, they would do that, had seen to it that I couldn't enter their maddening illusory funhouse even if I wanted to. I strode among the remains of my profession as I imagine a reverent academic would stride among the ivy-coated brick walls of a college campus, with jubilation and awe. I happened upon my office. It was virtually untouched from last night, save of course the unmistakable aroma of charred furniture and that sickly dawn hue. A dozen VHS tapes, scattered across the floor, all of them melted through the heat into amorphous mockeries. They had been here, and shown evidence of their interference and callous wreckage like wild beasts of the wood. She had given them safe passage in. There were still some out there, had to be. Didn't dare peer out the window? A TV was set up on top of my desk. How thoughtful they had been, meticulous in every little detail of their routine, to provide me with a means of travel. Though the lights remained off, the TV was on, displaying the beautiful lapis lazuli vortex I had come to know through years of trial and error. Sat down in my swivel chair to mull the night's events over in my head, order of events. Clutching my temple. That's where I've been. Here, at my desk, notepad and ballpoint pen, scribbling these etchings down so I won't forget them. I can't forget them. Not as long as the TV remains on. Not as long as I'm presented with that default status of nothing. It burns my remaining eye like lemon juice, because I know it isn't really nothing. I know that, somewhere deep within the assembly of the machine, there's a conscious brain active, working against me, displaying text and tracking information when called upon to do so. I'm right where I was last night, albeit no more whiskey. I'm sober, fully aware of everything, even if all there is to be aware of is the accursed screen they intended for me to discover. I'm studying it real close. Every last node in the RGB color display. Red, green, and blue, all shining through with crystal clarity, creating close approximations of every other color. Now they only imitate a wide turquoise absence. It's time for me to leave, isn't it? They say that when you die your entire life flashes before your eyes. I remember nothing, I'm drawing a blank on nearly every count. I remember so little about my own time here, despite my efforts to initiate and promote memory. I wasn't that notable a person. I tried my best, maybe that's all anyone can really hope for when it comes to this. That you tried your best. You failed, but you exerted something. Exertion doesn't matter to them. I know that. Just like I know that this isn't the real archive. That it's been gone since the morning, that this TV isn't real, that it would be impossible for it to be turned on, for me to be looking headlong into the cyclone of cosmic microwave background. These things are all thoroughly impossible. Yet they're here regardless. Slowly, I am being erased. My effort, my work, my dreams and aspirations. They're gone now, replaced by only a dull throbbing near my left cheek and mild amnesia. This didn't start with me and it won't end with me. It started a long time ago. I know it did, can't assume everything revolves around me, that would be what they expect, yet I defy their expectations. I'm not the main character of any narrative, I'm only a small piece, a cog in the machine. Cogs and gears grinding together to turn the hands on the axis. Wherever it started, in whatever long-forgotten unrecorded era, it started with viscera and electricity. I can be certain of that. Yet it seems as if it began for me in that underpass on South Broadway, camcorder slung over my shoulder, walking along the fence surrounding the vacant lot, peering into the decrepit buildings with the shattered windows in the hot arid midday sun. How long ago was that? Was I the one who did that, or was that someone else? You can hear them, probably, if you concentrate. In the thick of absolute silence, you can pick up the rustling sound they produce as they slither across the ground. I'm so cold. Blue light filters in and the screen hums perpetually with the long blue continuum, and outside the others are gathering their forces. They continue to accrue out there in the dark and evil dawn, rallying the troops, in solidarity against my accursed and frail body. They envy the flesh, the tangible, the apparent, for its self-evident properties. In mere moments they will break through the door downstairs, ascend to where I'm sitting, force me headlong into my favorite place. All of them, every last one, the little trick-or-treater and the woman with the barrel, the enigmatic specter who knew the perils of life too early and the bird, damn the bird, all of them, a coven of freaks and rejects who manifested themselves through ink, to climb the stairs and hoist me by my shoulders and put me out of my misery, or perhaps to place me into a greater misery than I have ever known until now. I have no respect for the past. I pretended to, for a while, might have even convinced myself on the surface level that I did, yet I violated its sanctity and plundered its depths. I discovered information that should not have been made public, knowledge which, if discovered, would shatter the limits of human perception, defy all reason, and in a mad rush spring forth in an unrestrained geyser of anger and indignation. I did not listen. Maybe I should have. Because I can hear them now. I'm listening. They're on the other side of the door to my office. You can hear them too, can't you? You would have to be crazy not to hear them.
Evening meeting. Originally posted to TapaTraders.com July 12, 2010. I know you all think I'm crazy. But I'm not. I know what I saw, and if you don't see them, if you don't hear them, then you're the crazy ones. They're as plain as day, I tell you. As crystal clear as a snapshot caught on Chrome 100 film. I saw him at approximately 7:45 p.m. driving east on Left-Hand Canyon Drive. It's sunset, the light is fading fast, but you can see the infinite expanse of prairie ahead of you, Haystack Mountain way out, a silent monolith in the oncoming night, and to my left are some power lines. I was returning from a trade show in Netherlands. Got some fascinating material up there to go along with the one of the woman in the room. I now have more. They're unlike anything I've ever seen. They draw you in, make you experience things more vividly than you could otherwise. Forget DVD. These videotapes are the future, I tell you. More interactive than virtual reality. I had a whole crate of them in the trunk. When I saw the man frying his brains out next to one of these enormous power lines, I swerved off the ditch and the whole crate tumbled off. I checked that my truck still worked. It did, put it in park, and went around to the back to pick all the videos up off the ground. But I had seen him, clear as day, crystal clear, standing near this enormous transmitter receiver thing they had installed. And his head was on fire. I thought maybe it was a suicide attempt, although from the impact I was still somewhat dazed. There was a loose wire at the base of the receiver that had become disconnected and it was emitting sparks. I was afraid it could start a wildfire and I would be blamed. They'd say I ran the truck into the pole or something. But I didn't. I swear I didn't, and at that moment the sparks started flying faster and faster, and the man appeared gradually, flickering on and off like a weary light bulb. I could see barely anything. The sun had sunk over the range and the hills were shrouded in shadow, and he writhed as the white-hot flow surged around his skin. In places it was boiling. He had the consistency of ash. I didn't go near him, I merely stood and placed the crate gingerly into the back and stared as he convulsed and writhed, letting out small noises in intervals. He had no features to speak of, save two piercing yellow eyes and that bizarre seething complexion. Near his feet were what appeared to be several scattered sticks, and then he opened his mouth and a piercing shriek rang from top to bottom, and the power line began glowing with white-hot heat from where I was standing to the inestimable depths of the horizon. It was positively malicious. With the yell of this thing, he lifted his arms and a tape I had bought at the exchange rose from the crate before bursting into a vivid ball of flame about 20 feet over our heads. And all the while he was overflowing with radiance. "Ellis," it said. I approached the front of the truck and began feeling for the handle of the door, but I was frozen stiff with shock. The thing knew my name. And it was only me and him out here, alone, in the twilight expanse. I chose to meet him on his own terms, though while he was attached to the tower via the wire he seemed powerful enough to break free and slit my throat. Of course, if he was capable of that, he likely wouldn't have done so already. "Hello," I said. I don't know what I was thinking. I had seen these things before, in some capacity or in some small way, but I don't know how to approach them, how to interact with them, what the best methods are. This was the first I had seen in its complete form. God, he was terrible to behold, even in these low visibility conditions. "Give me the tapes, Ellis." The voice of the thing was like that of a cable channel with bad reception. It hissed and cut out, and he lunged forward for the crate, which was now piled neatly and safely underneath the tarp. I lunged backward as he did so, and the wire that tethered him to this row of equipment let loose a shower of sparks the likes of which you don't usually witness outside the 4th of July. I said nothing then, and as he retreated to his position at the base of the tower I crossed my arms and planted both shoes into the mud and watched as the row of towers switched on and off, from complete luminescence to absolute darkness. It was, as Nietzsche said, a test of the will to power. I did not take my eyes off his flickering yellow holes, and my eyes, which I imagine were glinting like a cat's in the soft purple twilight shades, were bored into as he probed me every facet of my being. And we both stood as the wind picked up and whipped through the trees on the opposite side of the road. There was no traffic along Left-Hand Canyon Drive, only the incessant buzz of the copper tubing and steel plating which housed the structure, the insulative rubber melting in small drips from the lines as this thing, whatever he was, continued making blood-curdling noises of anguish. He wouldn't be getting his hands on the tapes. He was powerless, and he knew that. I keep seeing them. The more tapes I collect, the more I film on my camcorder, the more they pop up. Not just the weak one, which I left behind in his pathetic existence after he vanished into thin air. The new ones are stronger. Better at what they do. They want my collection. Have to keep it locked away in the basement, only bring it up for very special occasions now. And they whisper to me at night. I need somewhere safe to keep the tapes, somewhere I know they can't get at them. It's about the will to power. Whose will is the stronger, man, or beast? Who will triumph? Will they rend me limb from limb, splay my hide out on my rooftop, or will I outsmart them, somehow? Surely they must have some kind of weakness. Tapes fit into it. That thing wanted my tapes, wanted to destroy them. They want to destroy all that I've worked for. Only time will tell.
An Exercise in Futility. Extracted from the chatroom of Spectre Explorers, September 2, 2006.
Is anyone here? It's late where I am, but I'm holding out hope for someone to talk to.
Anything in particular?
Not really. Was just hoping to introduce myself to the forum. I joined yesterday and have browsed the posts, especially on the True Encounters board. It's pretty cool how many people are willing to share their own ghost stories.
Agree, it is comforting to know that you are not alone. Lee is your name?
Yeah, Leah. Or my friends usually just call me Lee.
Okay. Do you have any ghost stories in particular you would be willing to share?
Not really. I do believe in ghosts, have since I was 4 and my grandma passed away. I always felt like she was somewhere around. But have not seen or heard anything really paranormal up until present day. Like I said, do believe in ghosts. There really is no reason not to believe in ghosts, you know? Like, we can't prove them, sure, but we can't disprove them.
Agreed. Welcome to the forum, by the way. I'm always excited when a new member joins.
Hi, Kismet. Any explorations recently?
Ghost trips, you mean? Nah, not lately. I've been too busy with sophomore year starting to explore anywhere. But I do think my trip to the train yards yielded some worthwhile results. Orbs, also caught what I think is some voice on my tape recorder. It really shows up when you pass it through a filter. I will do more in about a month, though, don't worry.
Don't come here, Alex. I'm really not in the mood for this tonight.
Pardon?
Oh, sorry. Meant to text that to my boyfriend, Alex. He was saying he was going to come down to the gas station tonight to hang out.
I take it you work at a gas station?
Yeah, the night shift. I signed on about a year ago and it's been tricky to fit all my classes in and get decent sleep, but it pays really well. I work behind the counter from around 9 to 3 in the morning. Alex sometimes fills up here, and when he does he always comes in and talks my ear off for like half an hour. It's nice, because the job can be boring and it's nice to have a distraction, but he is really annoying. Last time he came in he started shoving licorice up his nose, so tonight I think I want a break. Plus it's usually pretty busy about now.
You're there right now.
Yeah, I have a laptop and the Wi-Fi here is pretty good. My boss says I'm free to browse the web so long as nobody comes in, but if they do I have to get up and deal with the register. So if we're ever talking on here and I'm gone for a few minutes, that'll be why. But most of the night I just get to sit back here and mess around.
Sounds enviable.
So, do you have any ghost stories?
I do. I've been fascinated by the paranormal ever since I had an encounter with the entity known as the Hat Man in 1992. Are you familiar with it?
No, never heard of him. What's he like?
I believe Spirit Guide 100% on this. There are way too many details for it to be made up.
That's good you haven't encountered him, Leah. The Hat Man is one of the most malevolent entities documented. He warped reality for me back then, made me experience elaborate hallucinations and delusions. But he was no delusion. There are records of people seeing him, Leah, which go decades back. He's tall and thin, wears a hat with a noticeable brim, and manifests for the most part like a flat, completely dark silhouette except his eyes, which are lit up. He's a menace.
Like a shadow person?
Yes, exactly like that. When he found me it was raining. Sometimes it's night, other times he stands above you while you're sleeping. The accounts vary, but a few details remain consistent throughout. He's never pleasant. Ever since I encountered him, I've dedicated my life to finding more out about him. Finding out how to kill him so he doesn't pose a threat to anyone else.
Well, good luck with that. I hope I never run into him.
The odds are relatively slim that you would. There are a lot of other paranormal beings and ghosts out there.
Plenty of other fish in the sea, if you keep an open mind and your eyes peeled.
Definitely going to avoid hats from now on, LOL.
Anyway, good luck on your job at the gas station, and welcome to the site.
Bye for now.
Yeah, like I said it pays really good. There aren't many people who are willing to stay up this late, and I can also get some of my studying done while I'm in here. Aiming for a doctorate.
That's very admirable.
A tourist guy just came in and he's looking in the freezer. Got to go.
All right. Good night, Lee.
Is anyone on tonight?
Yeah, I'm on. Usually I'm one of the only ones up this late. I don't have to go to work until the afternoon. I work at a construction site and it takes a lot of effort, so in the evenings I just chill.
Wow, interesting.
Tell me about it. We're dismantling this old apartment building from the 60s. It's been on the street for decades with nobody living inside it, completely empty, and apparently nobody wanted to buy the place. So now we're supposed to go on site with an excavator and a couple bulldozers and tear the place apart. Every so often during my break, I go inside the place and check out all the exposed wiring, all these broken walls which give way to the outside world. And most of the furniture is still intact, too. It's a shame to think it'll all end up in a landfill somewhere.
I agree, people these days don't seem to have any respect for history. You mentioned last night that you liked exploring abandoned areas? That there are more ghosts there, or something?
Yes, as a general rule of thumb you're more likely to see ghosts at abandoned or neglected areas. I run a blog where I detail some ghost hunting expeditions I've gone on with pictures. I've also been uploading some videos I captured to a website called YouTube.
Sounds cool. Link?
Sure, it's on MySpace.
How do you decide where to go? Like, what are the criteria? I've always wondered about that.
Usually you want to go someplace with nobody around, ideally with low light. I've captured a few orbs out in the forest, at a spot where some girl in a hippie cult supposedly went missing. That's the other main factor, it has to be an area of death, or suffering.
Yeah, that does make sense.
So what are you up to tonight?
Downloading some songs on LimeWire while I'm waiting for my boyfriend to pick me up at the end of my shift.
LimeWire? Isn't that illegal?
No, I don't think so. Besides, if they sue me, I'll just set my computer on fire. Good luck finding what I downloaded then, LOL.
I heard it has some kind of spyware, Lee. If you are going to use it, at least be careful.
Oh, come on. You're not really one of those, you wouldn't steal a car, you guys, are you?
No, not particularly. I'm not very invested in the subject. I've just heard some bad things about LimeWire, is all.
You should try it sometime, it's pretty good software. Unless you really think the internet shouldn't be used as a free repository of information, which is what it was designed for in the first place. Hell, I even own most of these albums on CD, but they have things coded into them that makes them hard to copy into my files. It's my right as a consumer to build a digital library.
Well, okay. Just don't say I didn't warn you if your computer gets infected with a Trojan or something.
Don't worry, I won't.
ROFL.
Okay, I'm back. Some lady came in and had a question about some discontinued brand of Pringles she liked. And then she got an iced tea and asked for some change so she could use the car wash. She's out there spraying off the floor mats and hood and everything with the power sprayer. It is kind of a surreal image this late at night.
It must be. That late at night, of course.
Oh, hi. Are you new to the board? I joined a little bit ago.
You could say that.
How the hell did you get on? I didn't manually approve you, but I got an email a few minutes ago that said you had replied to the Cuyahoga Falls thread. Where did you get that information, anyway?
I have my ways. That's all I'm really willing to admit. How are you doing tonight, Leah?
Fine, I guess. Who are you?
If you hacked into the back door, I will be reporting you to our web host and they'll look into it. Possibly take legal action.
I'll take my chances. I was talking to Leah.
Like I said, I'm okay. What do you want?
No, Leah. I'm not Alex. Nice guess, though.
What now?
Just looking out for you, girl. From someone who's made the same mistakes you have. Take it with a grain of salt if you want, Leah, if you really don't want to admit that what you're doing is hurting you. Hurting the people around you. I've always taken it with a grain of salt, myself. I just need to let you know that for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction.
I'm confused. What are you talking about?
You wouldn't steal a car, Leah. Would you steal a clock?
GTFO. Really, who is this?
Look outside, Leah.
It was that lady in the car. I ran out, but she was already pulling out of the driveway by that time. I know it was her. She probably had a computer on her. What a weird bitch.
How do you know for sure, though?
Are you kidding? She says, look outside, and then I do, and I see her typing at something in the passenger's seat. I come out from behind the desk, she goes around and looks at me with this knowing smirk and hops in the driver's seat and speeds off. I have no doubts. What I really wonder is how she was able to access our Wi-Fi. I didn't give her the password, only employees are supposed to have it.
You should call the cops, Lee, report her. Show them these chat logs as proof.
That would be easier said than done. I didn't catch her license plate. It started with J, I think, but I'm not sure about that. They could spend months looking for the car. It was kind of generic. Dark color. But I don't know car models or anything.
Well, at least you have a description of her. You can give the cops that.
She was medium height, had a black shirt and blue slacks. And some kind of necklace. She was a brunette, maybe it was dyed. And a name badge, so I guess she worked somewhere. Some kind of employee. Wasn't able to read it close. 26, 27 maybe.
That's a good start. Do you have access to a phone?
No, honestly it's okay. I'm not going to call the police. Alex will be here in about an hour, and the last thing I would want is for him to get here and the gas station is surrounded by police cars. He doesn't like going near cops, he had a run-in with them in junior year and hasn't stopped talking about it ever since. He wouldn't forgive me.
I banned her account. Damned if I know how she actually got on here without being approved. I'll look into it some more tomorrow.
I just need to go home and rest. I have some kind of stalker, but I honestly have more to worry about than that. If anything else happens, I'll tell someone. For right now, though, I think I just need to relax. I should go.
If you say so. Good night.
WTF? Sorry about last night. When you saw WTF, that was Alex typing that. He says he found me asleep behind the counter with a nosebleed. He offered to take me to the hospital, but I told him I probably just fell asleep and I went into the bathroom to plug it up. But he was really confused and looked on my laptop.
God, that sounds bad. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I don't regularly get nosebleeds, but I think I was so stressed out I just fell asleep in half an hour or so. But I'm okay, now. I've googled if stress can cause nosebleeds, apparently it can. Don't worry, though. I brought my cell phone and if that woman shows up again I will call the police.
Good idea. Always smart to take precautions.
You should take a day off, Lee. After whatever happened last night.
No, really. I'll be okay. It was just a nosebleed. People get those. Maybe it's that I'm awake too late. I'd have to quit this shift, and it pays really good. I don't think whoever it was will show up again.
Well, it never hurts to be careful. I've learned that from my ghost hunting adventures. One time I was exploring this old factory and a pipe swung down and almost hit me in the back of the neck. Must have weighed about 500 pounds, but I was wearing those sunglasses with the mirrors on them so you can see behind you, and I was able to duck before it hit me. I dunno. Maybe it was just luck.
No kidding. You actually wear those things? I always thought of them as more of a gag gift than anything else. I used to see them sold at my local Spencer's.
No, seriously. They do work as advertised, especially if you get a quality brand. It's like having a 360-degree panorama which expands your periphery. You know about the blind spot, right?
The part of the eye where there are no photoreceptors, right?
Right, exactly. Mirrored sunglasses can really help with that, because you're practically seeing twice of what you would otherwise. And when you're exploring some underground bunker or something, it can add an extra layer of security. Not just for falling pipes. But imagine if the Hat Man was back there. You'd want to know, right?
Kiss, please don't.
I forgot. Touchy subject, you're right. Sorry.
You can't make jokes about him. Because he is real. And that's what I've had to live with, that he is out there somewhere. The thing that made me think I had died for no other reason than pure, unfiltered evil. And everyone tells me it was just a dream. The worst part is nobody believing you. That's why I made these forums in the first place. Because everyone is like, oh, it was just sleep paralysis, or, oh, you just have to stop believing in him and he'll go away. Because he won't. He won't die. He'll probably kill me. I know it'll happen, that he'll return. And all I can hope is that when he does, I'll be ready for him.
You can only really hope, I guess, that you'll be ready for whatever happens. When it happens. Not if.
What are some of the craziest ghost encounters you've had personally, Kismet?
There is one that will always stick with me. It was around 10 years ago. I had heard rumors that a rest stop in the mountains was haunted. If I remember, I was new to the game then. Relatively inexperienced in the field, a lot more cocky and sure of myself.
That's not really being fair on yourself. Based on the pictures you took, you did acquire verifiable evidence of the supernatural, which is more than I've been able to do.
I just regret being so exploitative. You have to be respectful of the dead when you go out on these things. I guess I learned that the hard way.
What do you mean?
I still don't know what happened up there. All I know is that it was absolutely a place of unfathomable tragedy. The force I felt, whisking me around, was so strong that I still think about it sometimes. Especially since the glass wall was so thin. You have to understand, there was like a 70-foot drop. I could have fallen down. I would have died. Then I would have been the ghost.
I'm so sorry about that. Sounds awful.
Well, I've learned from my mistakes. I can admit as much. Browsing this forum, looking over the experiences of people who have had similar experiences with poltergeists, because I think that's what one of the spirits at the rest stop was, a poltergeist of some kind. It really confirmed a lot of suspicions and ideas I've had. I even keep a journal now, for reference. Helps unclutter the mind.
That makes sense. I watch some ghost hunting shows sometimes, especially on the weekends. They always seem to be right around the corner from making an incredible discovery, but they never quite reach their goals. I've wondered a long time what it would be like if the existence of ghosts was objectively proven. How it would affect the outside world, people's attitudes, that sort of thing. You said you captured definitive evidence?
I did, multiple photos. All of the female ghost who haunted the place. She was the one who initially attracted me to it. Although watching her stand there motionless, while behind her the rest stop's lights just kept shining, was really unsettling. Since then I don't think I've ever bothered to take any breaks at rest stops. Not worth it. Too much baggage.
If you think about it, they are places of suffering and tragedy. Less reported on, perhaps, but some of the seediest activities would take place in a secluded yet well-lit area like that.
Hang on a sec, Alex just pulled up. I think he wants to know how I'm doing. Be right back.
Have you figured out the hacking yet?
No, from what I can tell it's a closed system. I contacted the web host, but they don't seem to care.
That's too bad. If this site does somehow get hacked and destroyed, for whatever reason, I want you to know that it was a great run and I've had a great time on here. Meeting like-minded people and all.
Same. The memories are enough to last forever.
Alex doesn't believe me. About what happened last night.
I thought you told him about everything when he picked you up.
He didn't really believe me then either. Says I've been working too hard and I probably just imagined how she looked at me. But I'm not crazy. You all saw what happened. She literally said, "Look outside for God's sake."
Is Alex still there? Could you put him on the chat for a few minutes?
No, he left. Got a big bag of sunflower seeds. I guess him and some of the guys are going to a college baseball game tonight. Didn't even think to invite me. If he had, I would have called ahead and asked for a night off.
I don't know about any of you, but if I found my girlfriend passed out on her computer monitor with a nosebleed, I would at least believe her if she said she saw something out of the ordinary.
He's right, though. I do work too much. This in addition to all the courses I'm taking. It puts a great deal of stress on you to have a job and try to get a degree at the same time. My mind is constantly in two places at once, and the worst part is that it's of my own volition. I made a choice to live like this. The consequences are mine to bear.
Stress can induce hallucinations in some cases, Leah, but I do think the woman you saw last night was the same one on here. There really is no other explanation.
I think I'm going to listen to a few albums to pass the time tonight.
That's a good idea. Music usually helps me relax. What albums do you have downloaded?
Bootlegs, mostly. That's one of the reasons I installed LimeWire. You can find some really cool tracks and demos that you wouldn't hear otherwise, on just a normal CD or something. I have an external hard drive I store them on. It's mostly old shoegaze.
You really shouldn't store that much, Leah. It could wear your computer down.
Some guy is looking around the soda. Hang on.
I'm probably going to hit the hay for now. If Alex ever gives you some baseball tickets, Lee, give them to me instead. I'll go. Ha ha.
It's raining now. Going to try to get some homework done while I'm waiting. I'm so tired. I guess the rain is making me sleepy. Has a relaxing sound to it. It's pouring sheets tongite, so probably won't have any more customers. Just me and the computer screen and songs on my headphones. Makes studying easier. Is anyone on? I guess not. Back to work. Thought I heard the little bell on the door. Can't really tell with the headphones, but nobody is outside, so I guess it's just the rain. Kinda bored, but I do need to get these filled out before tomorrow. Somebody is messing with my head.
What happened?
I'm crouched behind the desk right now. Someone came in and they're crawling around the aisles below eye level. I caught a glimpse of them. It's probably Alex. Going to jump out and give him a piece of my mind.
Don't. You don't know it's him. Just call the police, as fast as possible.
Going to peek. It's not him.
Who is it?
I think I get what she meant now. I think I get it. But it's too late to get it.
You mean the woman?
She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to warn me can't make any noise on my keyboard. It has legs, oh God, it has legs, I can hear it out there. It wants me. What do I do? What the hell do I do?
Stay calm. Call the police. Cover the speaker with your hand.
The police can't help me. Nobody can stop this, oh God, I think it heard me. I'm going to try to make a break for it. But it will hear me.
Lee? Are you okay?
Time stops for no one.
Genetic Opportunity, originally posted to the Minneapolis Jobs Board May 14, 1997. Applicants wanted. Team of highly qualified grads at UM are looking for applicant. Ideally, 2035, stocky, rough build, pref male, but female will also work given proper conditions. Want spontaneity. Running through on a first-come, first-served basis. We pay handsomely. Message us on our Usenet board, UM Genealogy Team, or respond below. Are on the verge of something, need quick replies, and to be easy on hand. Easy to work with. Get back as soon as you can. Space is filling up fast.
Hi there. Saw your offer. I have to say I'm tempted. I'm in a bit of a situation right now. My uncle is in the hospital and the whole family is up in arms over his bill. Needs some kind of expensive heart medication before he can go home. Poor bastard's in his chair looking off into the distance. I think if I sign up for your experiment or whatever it is, I'll end it and buy him his medication. I'm not exactly charitable most of the time, but he is my uncle and he's been nice to me, so I figure, hey, what the heck? It's worth going out and putting myself on the line. Name is Derek, 21, so I fit your criteria to a T. I wouldn't exactly say I'm the stockiest guy around, but I did play some ultimate frisbee in high school. You'd be surprised what it can do for the arms. About 170 pounds, 5 feet 9 inches. I don't know if that matters for your purposes, but there you go. As for the fitting in part, I doubt we'll have an issue with that. I work well in team settings. Have participated in one study before. When I was 19, we tested skin cream and I think I did pretty good. Got free samples afterward. Of course, whether I go through with this or not will ultimately depend on how much money you're talking. Uncle's heart medication will cost $700. If possible, would also like a little extra spending cash so I can buy myself something nice. We'll discuss more when we meet. I also took a look at your Usenet board. It's pretty sophisticated. You guys must get some really good funding. Posted this same thing on there, too, so you'll be sure to notice. I'm available Tuesday through Saturday, but will be sure to keep my cellular phone on me at all times so I don't miss your call. My number is 612-474-9903. Looking forward to whatever you've got. I'm confident I can handle it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Hey there, Derek. Great news. Our team has taken a look at your background, and you check out. We're also sorry to hear about your uncle's heart condition. These days, it seems like everyone is dying of some sort of disease. We hope we can help you. $700 is easily within our range, given the amount of endurance and dedication this study will require. Come over on Saturday. We're in the Fielder building on the 2nd floor. If you have trouble finding it, our receptionist can help you out. We think given the description you provided, you'll work, but we need you to report for a quick interview and subsequent physical examination. Don't worry too much. We've done this with all the applicants. The process will be quick. We can't wait to meet you.
Thanks for everything. The receptionist was nice and your staff was very friendly. Also the upfront payment. Like you said, the process was easy. Can't believe it's over, myself. Anyway, how you instructed, I'm going to report the effects every day I take the substance. Not sure if this board will work, but if you have any problem with me jotting down the effects here, then just say so and I can record them on my notes or something. I'm going through the checklist you gave me and I'm looking it over. All this paperwork is pretty long, but I think I should be able to get it. If not, I have a lawyer friend who'll help me sort through most of it. Your techniques seemed, well, remarkably advanced. I only took some chem and biology in 11th grade, but I've been reading up on this cloning stuff lately and it really interests me. They cloned that sheep, there are pictures of her and everything. Pretty soon you could get people cloned. Not to say that's appealing or anything, but I would be lying if I said the prospect of having a smaller me around to do chores or whatever isn't kind of neat. It's nice that you people are doing research into that. It could put Minneapolis on the map if you have any sort of breakthrough. Hope your other applicants are doing well, too. I've decided to take the substance after a good meal. Like you mentioned, the results could be corrupted without nutrients. Tonight I'm going to make myself a steak with some asparagus, then some ice cream. After that I'll go upstairs, take a dose, and go to sleep. Need lots of energy tomorrow. Hopefully none of this will do anything. Your facility had some neat equipment. I especially liked that processor you had. Looks top of the line. I guess you need that when your field is genetics, to process all those base pairs and helixes or whatever they're called. Amazing that way down we're just lines of code. If I look down to the cellular level, all those cytoplasms and alleles working in harmony. It's like a little factory down there. The tour you gave me after the procedure was over has convinced me that maybe I should think about attending MU. I've been putting it off, trying to start a restaurant with some starting capital my dad gave me, but maybe college is for me, after all. The campus was really nice, good sun and lots of areas for studying. I'll definitely look into tuition, if any of you know some scholarships that could also help me out. Refer me to your eligibility board or whatever. Restauranting takes some innovation, and you've always got to stay one step ahead of the competition, so maybe some of your classes could help me out there. Especially the food safety one. My cousin works in meat packing and he says that when the owls come knocking they'll usually find something to complain about. Anyway, that's all I have to say tonight, for the time being anyway. We'll report what happens tomorrow. And again, seriously thank you for the upfront payment. My uncle is going to feel a lot better. Gotta go downstairs now, steak smells done. Okay, I took the substance like you said, 1 dose with water. After that I reclined on my futon for about an hour, watched some TV. The Pretender was on, It was a season finale and I didn't want to miss it. I know you said to go to sleep immediately, but 1 hour of TV couldn't hurt. Anyway, I had a dream where I was in a glass building looking at the sky. Then I woke up around 7 a.m. I'm writing this around 6 p.m. Dinner tonight is going to be delivery pizza with a 2-liter of Sprite, then another dose. Might also make myself a side salad. I've been using your sheet to determine how many calories are in everything, and I think it'll add up. I think I should mention something that happened today. Sundays I usually go out and walk around downtown for a while, not really to buy anything because usually I'm pressed for cash, but there are some nice displays. I got to this one display, I think they had a stereo set in the window, and I was looking at it for about 2 minutes when I noticed my reflection in the glass. It was kind of like my eyes were focused on the setup and then they snapped back and I saw myself. Absent-minded. Something about how I looked didn't look right. I can't place it, it wasn't anything physical but it was subtle. If I'm not being specific enough, I apologize. Maybe it had something to do with the curvature of the glass. It was also hot out and the sun was bearing down on me, maybe I was suffering from heat stroke, although I doubt it because I didn't feel all that hot. My reflection was wrong, somehow. For a second I wondered if it was actually me I was looking at. Then everything became clearer in my field of vision, I looked myself over and I was fine, the street was how it had been. The stereo set was right there and my reflection was okay. But there was something really disturbing about seeing myself like that. Again, I can't say for sure how it was wrong, can't put my finger on it. Maybe something about the eyes. I walked around for another hour or so, looked in more windows and nothing was wrong there, either. Then I got back home and watched TV for about 2 hours. By this point it was getting to be evening so I ran myself a bath and tried to relax. Nothing else has happened so far. Could be completely unrelated to the substance, might be an illusion like I said. Not sure how that could happen, though. Given how you described this, I doubt it would affect my mental state. It's about 15 minutes until the pizza guy said he would be here, but he usually runs at least 10 minutes late. It's getting dark outside and I'm getting tired. A couple minutes ago I called my girl, she has a lot of things to do over at her place so I haven't had a chance to go over and see her much, seems like she's always busy and only has a few minutes to talk to me on the phone. Wouldn't want to disturb her, she's great. Still have about 5 pages of this paperwork to go, might put it off because it looks complex. I'm not sure, really. If I do, I'll be sure to have it for you by the deadline. I figure making these entries takes more effort, but I enjoy it. How is work at the lab going? You guys are performing miracles over there, keep it up. There are a lot of genetic diseases that are even worse than pathogenic ones, and there aren't any cures. If you have one, you just have to live with it for the rest of your life, because there aren't any external factors. The disease is programmed into every cell in your body, each and every square inch of you is targeted. I know you guys already know all this, but it's a disturbing thought. Anyway, good night. Went to see my uncle at the hospital today, got everything taken care of as far as that goes. He's looking a lot better, his insurance covers all the treatment but that medication can be a bitch. The doctors were joking at the desk about betting who in the ward will die first. Made me sick listening to that kind of thing. Doctors shouldn't be talking like that, especially where patients or relatives can hear. I had accidentally brought the substance along, it was sticking out of my pocket. What's this? He asks, pulling at it. Just something I'm taking, I said. It's supposed to benefit me somehow, something to do with something called chromatin. Then he leans back in his bed, presses the button on the side and it makes this noise, and he asks, is it illegal? I told him no, that it was officially sanctioned and that it was safe. He sighed, put his hands behind his head, and that was about the end of that conversation. In 3 days he gets discharged, goes back to my aunt's house. He's my dad's brother, he lives with my aunt, my dad's sister, and her husband. I sometimes wonder what that must be like, to live with your sibling when you're that old. It's either insufferable or tolerable, I guess. After that I had lunch at the 8th Street Grill. I've also been keeping track of lunch and breakfast. Today for lunch I had the burger and a house salad. Today's breakfast was cereal and a yogurt. Yesterday I think lunch was a leftover carton of Chinese food in the fridge, and breakfast was orange juice and some eggs. Day before that it was a casserole I made for lunch. Didn't have any breakfast that day. Don't worry, though. It all adds up to the correct amounts. I've been over the math and I think it should be fine. I've been watching a lot of TV, mostly, to pass the time. One thing I'm starting to notice is that I'll lie down, turn the TV on, and it'll be a show I'm interested in watching, but before I know it, the show will be over. It's not as if I forget what happened, it's more like time speeds up and I don't notice. For some reason this only happens when I'm watching TV. The end credits will be on and I'll feel like I just watched the theme song, but somehow I remember everything that happened during the episode. If I was just dozing off, I wouldn't know what happened. This has never happened to me before, so I think it's related somehow. Feels like a time warp. The first few times it happened I was worried, but now I've kind of gotten used to it. I kind of like it. If I don't like the show, I can tune out and the next thing I know, it's over. Kind of cool. Anyway, tonight I'm trying a new recipe, a lasagna I found in an old cookbook. There are some pretty weird recipes in old cookbooks, you'd be surprised. I'll take my dose. After that I'll probably try out this new TV thing for a while for an hour or two, then hit the sack. I'm tired. I woke up with a lot of messages on my answering machine. A lot of them were from her. As I said, she's very busy, so her voice was upset and she has a hostile tone. She asked about me, how I was doing, if I was going anywhere, and why she hadn't heard from me in so long. As if it's my fault that she always has something to do, it's no wonder we never spend any time together. I don't think she's cheating on me or anything like that, but given how little time she's willing to spend with me, I might break it off with her. Anyway, that wasn't the best thing to wake up to. After that I walked downstairs and cleaned up a little. The shelves were dusty for some reason, and some of the food in the fridge had gone bad. Probably a power outage. I threw it away. That lasagna last night was good, I added some dill. For breakfast I had some dry corn flakes, the milk had gone bad. Also had an orange. After that I put on my coat and went for a walk. It was nice out, I walked for around 2 hours, just admiring the architecture. After this I walked around the city center for a while. I remember going to it when I was younger, it's really changed. Looks a lot more modern, times are a-changing as they say. I got a turkey sandwich at the food court and a mango smoothie and sat down on a bench, watching the people go by. Cashier looked at me weird when I requested to know how many calories they were. Which is a perfectly reasonable question. With the diet craze going on these days, everybody has a right to know how much they're eating. Anyway, I just stared out for a while, looking at all the shops. I noticed a shop I hadn't seen before, it was a coffee shop. I had been to the center about a week ago and it hadn't been there, there was a boutique instead. The speed with which they renovate these places is pretty amazing. I imagine it takes a huge team to fix everything up and turn it all inside out. I threw my sandwich away and by the time I got to the doors it was already closing time. When I went in, it was only about 3 p.m. but I stepped out and the security guard waved goodbye and it was night. I guess I must have lost track of time, or maybe it was later than I thought when I got to the city center, but either way that isn't very good for the purposes of this record, which I assume you'll want to keep for your studies, and you need accurate information. By the time I got back to the house it was about midnight, I checked the clock. As I write this it's about 12:15, I'm going to order a pizza and then pass out. So far nothing has happened except these occasional moments of me completely spazzing out. I still remember everything, though, in some way. I can't explain it any more than that. Hope that satisfies you enough. My uncle's funeral was today. When he left the hospital, he seemed to be recovering, now he's buried. I attended the funeral, my parents called me and they told me that I better show up or there would be consequences. I had no idea what they were talking about. Then I checked the computer's internal clock, it's September. Monitors don't lie. September 1997, I went to sleep last night and it was May 1997. I feel like hell, stomach's a mess from malnutrition and I looked in the mirror and Jesus I looked old. If you think smoking can turn you inside out, talk about prolonged periods of unconsciousness. I finally realized how it is. You know how when you go to sleep, you start dreaming and the dream is incredibly vivid, right down to the last detail. Then you wake up and you can't remember any of it. Only you should be able to remember it. It was right there in your brain a second ago. It was such a real experience that it should register in your memory, only it doesn't. That's how these prolonged blackouts are. I remember them vaguely, remember eating as well as I could, shuffling around the house, going outside maybe once a week to keep my legs active. But the whole time I wasn't myself, I was somebody else. Acting on commands, basic motor functions to keep my systems running. Might have taken one bath. Now those months are one giant blur and I've snapped back to complete awareness. Feeling resembles being shot with a gun. And of course she's met another guy. I called her and she told me to piss off, that we were over, that this other guy could treat her better and that he was great in the sack, and to be frank I won't miss her that much. Still sucks, though, to know that there was nothing I could do about it. She says she came over to visit me once, that my eyes were glazed over and I was sitting on the couch mumbling something to myself. The food in the kitchen was, of course, rotten, according to her. Furniture was dusty. She left after maybe 5 minutes. Probably thinks I'm a heroin addict or something now. Maybe I ate some of it while I was out. In this state there's no way I could tell the difference between something that's rotten and something that's not. Could account for my malnutrition. I don't know if this study of yours is still going on, but I'm not going to take any more doses. Hell, it's probably over. The semester has probably started already, too late for me to enroll, and if I did everyone would be terrified. I'm going straight. I've missed enough of my life already, to see my uncle getting lowered into the cold earth with his embalmed shriveled hands over his chest, knowing that for the last 4 months he was living a pleasant life and that I could have gone over to visit him one last time if it wasn't for this shit is enough to convince me to give it up. And you better not ask for the money back, either. It's all gone. I guess I've been paying the rent while I was away. The surprises just keep on coming, don't they? The years start coming and they don't stop coming. According to a new song by a band called Smash Mouth, it woke me up this morning on my alarm clock radio, which somehow still works. Thing is filthy. It's 1999, almost the new millennium. I've been like this almost 2 years at this point. Didn't take a dose last night, or should I say 1997. How much of this time was spent comatose sitting around I don't know. I better get out the disinfectant wipes from the closet, wipe all the furniture down before night falls. Because when I sleep the world completes entire rotations, time gets a little distorted, doesn't it? Ha ha. Called my parents up, they've practically disowned me by now, talk about me like I was dead. Their son on the other side of town who never drops by to visit, always stays at home and never comes out, except very rarely. Neighborhood committees have signed petitions to kick me out, that my house and the stench coming from all this decay is lowering the value of their property. Greedy pricks. I don't know what to say anymore. This shit has ruined my system so that I go into the deep whether I take it or not. It's rewritten me from the ground up like a typewriter and I can't stop it. It's 4 a.m. and I'm going to stay up as long as I can because while I'm here I have time to do things, fix things, go around and try to repair the damage. Been sealing cracks in the walls all night, repainting, washing, throwing away the old food. Ordered a pizza. It tasted delicious but it's a different guy now and they've changed their recipe. I ate it like a pig, then I took a bath. Don't know how often I've done that, my teeth are starting to hurt. Also ordered months worth of groceries to be delivered sometime tomorrow. Can't place my confidence in my subconscious, because it can't take care of me as well as my normal mind. Can't do everything I do, no matter what the new age gurus say. If anybody reads this, or hell even if someone from the Fielder team reads this, just know that I'm trying, that something must have gone wrong, the calories or the exercise or something. And if you know what to do, please help me. I need to find something. I'm staring at the screen and trying to stay awake, reciting things in my head because once I slip I can't get out of it, it'll be over me again, and at that point who knows what the next time will be? 3 years, 5, I wake up and everybody has tubes in their head. Years 2003 and we have Bush Jr. for president. Out of everyone had to be him, makes sense in sort of way. Went to campus today, Spent day walking and got there and it was hot and there are people around. So many people haven. Seen this many people in long time. It's strange talking and seeing and they avoided me of course because who wouldn't? Talking around and knowing what was up and then get to the building. No building there, it was gone, packed up and left Asked guide, said it was out, had been moved, was gone and I figure you're all graduated now winning Nobel Prizes under shiny spotlights. Well, you can't ignore me, can you? Can you ignore this face, sunken eyes, stomach ready to collapse? Just nothing but a bare field, a bare lot now, some people talking on it, maybe never existed. Who's to say I'm crazy and it was all a dream, babblings of an insane person. Don't mind me, my head is about to explode, house is such a mess, goddamn. It's kind of poetic now, I'm loose from time, can go forward and the surprises never stop, a passenger on voyage to the end of time, last redoubt looms large overhead, black monolith in that endless night. Walk toward the black hills, there are 7 lights, no one knows what they are but I'll see them soon enough and many will be a crater of fire, things engulfed as I keep going on and no stopping now, because why would there? Need to shit but going to hook up my record player, pump disco through the windows, blast myself, neighbors will complain, so what? Police will come throw me into cell and won't care about it, I'll sit and look out through bars, eyes glazed over embalmer's glue. Next stop infinity. Writing from public library, somehow can't remember shit except password for this forum. Goddamn forum, still up, gonna update long as it's up. It all makes so much sense now.
The group that would hoard time. Originally posted to It Burns. Time is a finite and fleeting resource. I think we can all agree to that. It is elusive, slips from your grasp like quicksand if you try to pick it up. Though we have clocks, they can't truly measure time. Even the atomic ones in the laboratories with the massive antennae miss a nanosecond here and there. Inconsequential for our purposes as beings, neither on the level of the mayfly or of the tortoise, but gaps in the record nonetheless. Gaps which, given our understanding of time, have no reason to be there. But I see all this from another angle. Start from the premise that time is a finite resource. Now envision time as a commodity. Of course it is. Now take every second of every day you can't account for. The moments you lie back in the park and watch the clouds, getting swamped with projects that demand completion, 1 second it's noon and the next you look up at the window and it's pitch black. Where did the time go? If you would, see these holes in your perception as snippets to be bought and sold on the time exchange as a commodity, of course. When you're not looking at a clock, the beings which run this time exchange can steal a few moments, or restore a few moments to you, and you're not likely to notice. And even if you are looking at a clock, they can add or subtract some seconds and you won't notice. Unless you obsessively stare at your clock 24/7, you can't be sure what I'm saying isn't true. If you've ever slept, make that uncertainty double. They sometimes take whole hours when you're unconscious. Invisible worlds like these aren't worth seeking out. If the beings who run the time exchange know you're onto them, they'll steal less time from you. They have other clients to attend to. So don't try and catch them doing this. Just keep that in the back of your head the next time you feel you've been sitting in on a lecture for an hour and it's only been 5 minutes. It's not your short attention span. It's the purchase and sale of your time. Time is a finite commodity, but that does not mean it can't be traded like gold or silver or any other limited resource. While I am not a time exchanging being myself, I performed various tasks which I suppose you could say were in the general realm of buying and selling time. Doing things quicker so that other people could enjoy themselves. Repairing roofs, cleaning out gutters. But my biggest passion, early on due to a course I took in high school, was videography. The idea of capturing a moving image and then being able to watch it later so impressed me that upon graduation and enrollment into a prestigious law firm I took up editing work on the side. It was a tactless and soulless endeavor, but it fed my obsession. I had the basic equipment: camcorder, various lenses, a fresh supply of tapes and a CD-ROM with a decent moonshine level video editing program baked onto it. I would always be there, a consistent presence in the lives of my neighbors, not hanging around to take part in the festivities so much as to get every close-up and every angle. I would set weddings to soft violins, birthdays to a boiling calliope and frat parties to hard rock, and it paid well, and my clients were always pleased with the perks and package bundles I assembled. I was considered insufferable among my immediate circle. At my sister's wedding I took photographs without compensation. My sister came up to me while the crew was cleaning up the gazebo, and I was fiddling with my equipment, and she told me that my having pushed the camera in her face as she strode down the aisle was one of the most humiliating experiences of her life, and that if I wanted work professionally I would need to learn things like the rule of thirds and so on. I didn't care for any of that. I cared only for the facts, an accurate record of the events which had transpired, with no aesthetic flares or gimmicks, and told her as much. When I got married, 2 years later, I was pleased to find my wife was more permissive. She allowed me to keep a full box of tapes in the garage, never objected to the power consumption my camcorder took, but beneath it I now suspect she was in actuality as angry as my sister, being aware that no good could come from my all-consuming passion with a lens and a microphone. And there it was, arranged on the shelf in alphabetical order. Every birthday, notable event, town parade, or idea I had was transcribed onto gelatin-coated plastic, fed onto a spool, and held in cold storage. And the calendar pages turned and my wife became pregnant, and as she went through labor pains I stood beside her, ample memory in hand, strap buckled tight, lens pointed at her face. And the pain she felt through this ordeal was real, and it was manifest. The first time I saw Ellis, it was a bitter cold night on the patio and we were hosting a kind of celebratory gala. It had been forced upon us by our respective social circles, and the weather was not conducive to a festive atmosphere. We stood hanging in frigid silence and ate dry meats which had been catered by a Grecian specialty shop, and my wife stood by the fire pit trying desperately to keep her arms warm. And the air was permeated throughout with a kind of lingering frost which accumulated on any surface it could find. And while during the event my mind was elsewhere watching our peers, seeing how they responded to these circumstances, and so on, I have viewed the tape from that night. I had been to the camera shop that day and nabbed their entire supply of VHS tapes, and whenever I play these tapes in particular there appears to be more static than on the rest of them. An inordinate quantity. You glimpse Mr. Griskin pouring wine, you observe through the temporal veil Talia Chinowitz complaining about her heels, however they are covered by a thick layer of distortion. And it is my sincere belief that this static is only the frost, and that while I did not notice it at the time, the frost made the gathering look more like a living recording than an actual flesh and blood circumstance. It is eerie to see a world which fades in and out as this ice particulate drifts lazily through the air on winds unspoken. Ellis stood by the decorative hedge, making small talk with one of the curators of the local museum. She was old and weathered, and I picked something up about a bird. Ellis went immediately to his jacket pocket and retrieved a small notepad, jotting something down at a frenetic rate. While I didn't know his name and was unaware of his occupation, I knew certain things from this initial encounter. I was holding the camera at a slight tilt, it was heavy and my back was tired. And in this light the patio lamps were shining directly onto his face so as to make him a pivotal figure in the scene. Framed between two artificial juniper bushes, he was tall yet enthusiastic, and held his hands out, making wide motions, and as he did this his short sprig of alfalfa hair bobbed gently in the frigid breeze, and his stance was that of someone trying hard not to slip on the black ice. Steady and measured, I nearly said something to him then and there. But my sister came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder and asked me if there was any scotch left. She had transformed into somewhat of a booze hound by this point, I can only surmise to compensate for my camera addiction. By now our swath of suburbia was becoming ensconced in dreamlike paths of blue and swirling tapestries of purple, as the sun dissipated over the western horizon and the trees were filled with the rasping of crows. And she standing here under the floodlights and looks out of her league waist deep among people she has no interest in. So I offer to drive her home. As we make our way along those secluded lanes, those avenues of nocturnal quietude, She reclines and asks for me to turn up the heat. She lives on the other end of the city, and I suspect that while she and her husband have been trying to conceive a child, they've been unsuccessful. This has led to a sense of inadequacy about her, a melancholic stupor which settles onto her shoulders like thunder clouds even on the brightest days. And to think that I recorded their union on my CCD-TR-31, and that at any moment I can retrieve that tape and look for the first signs of crow's feet at the borders of her eyes, for the first signs that something is off with their relationship. It's an unsavory prospect. She tells me that her husband is asleep, that he has a long day of work ahead of him tomorrow, and that he was barely able to drop her off at the party. We pull around to the rear entrance and she hops out, and takes a can of spritzer from a cooler in the back seat. She's going to drink herself into a whirlpool of regret, I realize, but at the end of the day it's her life to live and I have no grounds to interfere. My brother-in-law is gaunt, homely, however from what I can tell he means well and has the best possible intentions given the circumstances which have brought us together like beads in a divine tapestry. When I arrived back at our house the crowd had dispersed and the yard was devoid of life, and I spent the next few hours disassembling the accoutrements, turning off the lights and bringing in the leftover food. I had missed out on a lot of recordable activity which theoretically would be impossible to prove ever took place in the future. No visual record of it. My wife said nothing as I snuck inside and vanished into the basement, where I kept my secret hoard. Had to put my camera away, disconnect it from its various ports and label the tape. In this inner sanctum, where nobody was to disturb me, I conducted a multitude of experiments and ventures which would make an amateur jealous and make an outsider scratch their head. Before me, lit by one incandescent bulb and beneath wooden planks and dusty windows, were rows and stacks of VHS tapes, a mountain of them, valleys and crevasses of recorded footage. My entire life was here, most from my high school years or after. And in one corner was the sacred television, attached to the holy VCR via the gospel of the RCA cables, and in this cathedral of concentrated time I felt at ease, safe and solemn and contemplative. The machine starts up and my friend Josh is driving across the state for the heck of it. He turns in my direction and gives a thumbs up as the midday sun wavers and the radio blasts contemporary rock hits. Haven't seen Josh in what seems like ages. Last I heard he was at a rehab clinic. Slip another tape in and my son is crawling over the rug in the living room. He is surrounded by blocks and playthings, and behind him my wife is sitting on the couch, a vacant expression framed by her auburn locks, apathetically reading a New York Times bestseller. My son turns toward the lens, and I imagine I appear like an insect thing to him, proboscis ready to strike, one dark eye trained on him and a mechanical head. He is puzzled. I open yet another box up and I am greeted with the private recordings, the ones which legally I cannot release to the public as they feature people who only wanted copies of the tape as souvenirs. I came and was paid and then left. I grab one at random. This was the ceremony of fire conducted by the occult society occupying the campus downtown. It is worse than I remembered. Perhaps I ingested enough absinthe to block these events out. All around my vantage point there is blood and viscera, candles and ether, and a rune is deftly carved into a member's stomach with a jackknife. I felt sick while recording it, but they paid me well. Enough to buy the thick crystalline windows which now sit at the far end of the greenhouse. Was it enough? One more flick of the button and the deck switches and I am once again present at my sister's wedding. She walks down the aisle but her eyes are always on me, gesturing for me to drop the box and have a seat. For whatever reason, call it insensitivity or insecurity or depravity, I keep the box trained on her and her paramour, and he recites the vows and she recited the vows with less enthusiasm, and they kiss without passion and I see it all, and can witness it on repeat in hi-fi stereo for as long as I want, as many times as I want. The same process looped ad infinitum. Start at the beginning of the runway of coupling, proceed. Press rewind and have these figures trip backwards like marionettes, pliable puppets who can speed up and slow down at my command. It is after the wedding and my sister has something gnawing at her. She dips the ladle in the punch bowl, approaches me, and all the while I keep rolling. A ladle of some sticky alcoholic substance, cheap liquor. She screams, and all the eyes of the people who have attended this, her most precious moment, remain still as cardboard cutouts. She whips the ladle behind her with a smooth pitcher's arm, and just as fast the camcorder is doused in that viscous tropical soup, at which point the tape stops and goes dark, and then it stops and I am alone in the basement at 3 a.m., and the screen is an infinite aquamarine. I am softly crying in the inner sanctum. So you can understand why, in the face of this mounting pressure, this slowly rising miasma, this daily preoccupation, I turn to Ellis for guidance and for clarity. When you first enter the field of law, you hear about the insane returns, the smooth sailing, and the lavish yacht clubs. Here I was, 3 periods after the bar exam, and still no yacht. And what's more, I failed to garner respect or even mutual admiration from my colleagues. While I was performing at a satisfactory level, they always refused to speak to me in the elevator, or include me in the office betting pool. I came in early, looked over some case files, ate lunch on the marble table in the main wing, reviewed some clients, that sort of thing. You can see why the tapes were my only break from this cyclical dead end I found myself in. Against all odds, the harder I pushed, the more nowhere I got. This lesson in futility, coupled with the rapidly deteriorating quality of my existence, was like a fall from a great height. As the ground approaches, I came to terms with just how sick and incompetent the world was, when you got right down to it. Nights in the basement. Studying every spool. It was a kind of ritual, a scripture I wrote and programmed into my schedule. Had to fit in enough time to go down to the video room, mark the labels and cross the boxes, check every tape and play it, and watch it, sit through it patiently until the end arrived and it turned to static and went click. Because, when you get right down to it, they provided me with a valuable insight to study human behavior, the angles at which my old friends folded their arms, the outdated fashion and the impermanence of national trends. The passage of time made its presence known while the calendar rolled forward and the tapes stacked up, and I recorded everything, from my son's little league games in the summer to carving pumpkins in the fall. I filmed other people, too, at the park and on the slopes, sledding and talking and driving. I pressed the button and flicked it off when the tape ran out, and then I labeled it and vacuum sealed it. Cataloged and cross-indexed. And it was somewhere around the second year of this madness that my mind returned to that party held on the patio, and the way I had seen Ellis. Between the bushes, hands at the ready. Talking about something. What had he been speaking with the old woman about? It had been lost in the mixture of light chatter and polite concessions, but the tape held everything. I could enhance certain portions, repeat them until what Ellis had said became clear, solidified. I spent the rest of the day down in the grotto, combing through boxes and boxes of this temporal effluvium. The tape in question was ultimately to be found in a nondescript plastic bag in the closet on my left. The first thing I noticed when I popped this tape in was how distorted Ellis was in contrast to the rest of the attendees. He looked like people on thermal cameras do. No amount of distortion could produce an effect this distinct. There was Mr. Lehner by the oak, dressed in gray polyester, as casual as always, and here was this strange freak whose alfalfa hair had become an intense violet and whose face was softly glowing. And over everything there was a thin yet unmistakable layer of static snow. Ellis, says the old curator, whose floral print dress fails to hide her sagging figure, whose digits are like the talons of some great eagle. How nice to see you here. The figures are distant at this point, though you can see the way Ellis perks up at the sound of his own name and turns. And now you can see how red he is, a scarlet wave of uncertainty on this gelatin length. And I approach through the crowd. Standing and watching, one step forward every now and again. Nice house, says Ellis. I wonder if they can afford it. Wry laughter. As Ellis laughs he deinterlaces, turning into several crooked little slats, then reassembles into what could loosely be termed a corporeal figure. The rest of the party continues as it had, same ice particulate on frozen winds and idle small talk between islands of compatriots. We have a disc for you, she replies after some careful deliberation. The heron. You know. We spoke about it on the phone earlier, and turning away from the crowd, though still in view of my lens, she grabs a floppy disk from the recesses and folds of that floral attire and gives it to Ellis, who looks it over before taking out some sort of protective case, snapping the floppy inside, and hiding it deftly. It is difficult to make out given how often he melds and wavers, but the basic nature of the disk and its size relative to both Ellis and the old woman are perceptible to the trained eye, of which I possess two. Ellis now turns in my direction. He sees me, but pretends, for the sake of the old woman, whose sanity would surely be dashed like a ship against the rocks were she to know she were speaking to a demigod who can alter the state of recorded physical media at will, not to perceive the surveillance. The tape flutters and spits as the conversation continues, but the audio is now chopped and Ellis is more unstable than ever, creating lines and patterns around himself which the everyman would not believe were possible to create using the medium of VHS. What he did is difficult to describe in words. His structure, head, body, legs were not so much disappearing completely as they were echoing in and out, like a distant scream off a faraway canyon. He was phasing. I guess that's the best way you could put it. Not an entity present in the present presented by the tape, but an entity whose consciousness was so greatly expanded that he could interact with events in the present as well as this physically recorded past. Phasing slowly through all possible permutations and distortions, scribbling madly on that notepad of his, all while the curator stood idly by and waited, the tennis balls at the base of her walker succumbing to the frost. She shook and pulled her thin garment closer around her waist. The static collects like snow on the bottom of the screen, piling up on the edges, falling from the top as if the screen were a windshield. Little grains of static. Not snow. Static. Oh, Ellis. You know something I don't you? As the static snow accumulates and covers the entire party, the screen flickers out and the tape cuts and I'm alone in the cool tepid seclusion, with more question than I've ever had thoughts shugging along smoothly. I yank this obscene treasure from the slot and return it to its box. Over breakfast while my son tries telling me about a new line of action figures, my thoughts are forever drifting back to Ellis and his weird skill. My wife asks me what I'm thinking about. I ask her who everyone at the gala was. She says he didn't know many of them. Some of them invited more strangers, who in turn invited more strangers. I tell her to narrow the list. She counts a few names off her fingers while she stirs oatmeal. I need coffee. It's going to be a long day ahead, I can feel it. Surely, I tell her, you noticed the gaunt man with the hair product. Surely somebody must have known him. The curator seemed to. Yes, the museum. That would be a worthwhile lead to pursue. Adventure, intrigue. The plot thickens. The oatmeal cools and I barely have time before I shovel spoonfuls of it down my gullet and then I'm striding down the front walk and slamming the door of the sedan. It's a weekend and I have all the time in the world. The museum is dark, small but kempt, nothing impressive in here save dust-covered tomes and oxidized relics. It's a kind of holdover from the days when suburbs were a new concept and the nuclear family was a sacred doctrine and milkshakes were a nickel, though this lends the place a sort of incorrect feeling rather than some idyllic charm. It is an establishment where ideas go to die. I jettison through the sarcophagi and trunks, eventually arriving on the second floor via a flight of stairs. The curator's office is only a short walk from here. I gather my bearings, walk forward and don't look back as the enclave seems to swallow me alive and the particulate in the air gathers like a swarm of angry hornets. In her office she waits, talons folded in on themselves, wizened and ripe, the overseer of an inheritance of useless garbage nobody bothers to visit. Here for something? Yes, actually. Cut straight to the point. I sit down before her. On the wall is a calendar a decade out of print, over her right shoulder a broken toaster oven. That man you were talking with, at the gala. You remember. You gave him some kind of data on a floppy disk. Something about a bird. She shakes her head, and the noise emanating from her lips is akin to rye papyrus which has settled in a suboceanic pool in the Dead Sea, with a Proto-Indo-European language inscription which may or may not have been fabricated by a Saudi swindler. "You're out of luck, boy," she says, rearranging her ornamental scarf. "I don't remember much about him. Nice party you threw. Love the cause. I always think that it's important to give back, you know. When I retire, which will be next year, before that I've always made sure to donate. It makes you feel good to do something for other people. And it was nice, the chauffeur that night helped me out of the car and over the ice on your sidewalk." "Yes, that's nice, but the disc." Her earrings tremble in the afternoon still. "Can't say for certain whether you want that. It is an internal matter, I figure." When she says this internal matter, her eyes become clouded over by a fog and her lips clench ever so slightly. Thin though they are, they transform into a disturbing vice, and the flip clock on the left of the desk moves its panels. "I just want to know where I can find him." "Finding him won't be easy," she says. "He moved upstate some time ago. Said it was to relocate his private collection. All I can do is give you his phone number. His address, I don't know. Think it was a small town near the state border." I nod and she withdraws a small notepad and pen, pulls off the top sheaf and scribbles something onto it. I take it from her, look it over, and smile. What he knows, I can't say for certain, but he's onto something. "Thank you. Don't mention it." I hit the road and the interstate is like the ribbon off a cassette, unfurling into endless possibilities, slick with fresh jet black tar. The skies overhead are damp and overcast, but show no signs of rain. The clouds keep the small droplets for themselves, gluttonous clouds hanging low over the prairie. They descend and swallow the earth like static, as if they were conscious, not rain, but fog, a deep fog which clings to your clothes and makes inhalation difficult, reduces eyesight. I flip on the brights of the sedan and hit the pedal and figure the journey will seem shorter. I revisit the page with Ellis' address, flip it over, make sure it doesn't get damp. Need to roll up all the windows. The fog gathers thicker, until even the red reflections cast by the rear lights of the cars ahead fade out as if they were in a movie. When the mist dissipates, it's 6 p.m. and the sun is setting and darkness is gathering, but all the same I find myself in the small town, which seems to be a kind of parallel to my own. Some of the names of the streets are identical, even down to their consecutive arrangement. Little souvenir shops line these lamplit lanes and nocturnal pedestrians step quietly along the evening paths, the romantic gardens. All of this is fine, but it's not what I came here for. His get-up is a short, ugly little gray building next to what seems to be an office of public records, although it's hard to make out the title on the front. The gray building looks as if it's foreclosed property, but all the same I step out and press the imperceptible electric buzzer which leads into the belly of the beast on frayed wires, and then, somewhere within this cavern of mysteries, I hear a slight squawk. Someone inside shuffles papers, looks toward me, and behind the dirty glass on the window panes he approaches. The sprig of hair stands as an electric bolt. "Hi. Anything I can help you with?" "Yeah. Can I come inside?" "Of course," he says, and moves aside. Usually we don't offer tours except on Sundays, but I'm the only one here and I'm bored. Sometimes you get so lost in your work you need a break, you know. My pupils adjust to the piss-poor lighting in this place. It's a shambles. Cans of beer scattered around, a rusty sink in one corner which I take serves as a photo development reservoir, given the clothesline hung over it, and an easel. Ellis grins and rubs his hands together. "Welcome to the Hypnagogic archive." Hypnagogic what? The quality of the air here is substantially lessened, too. I think it's chalk. Hypnagogic archive, he fiddles with a film canister next to a Commodore monitor. We preserve things. You know, films and music and like that, for future generations to enjoy. I think we were featured in a local newspaper lately. Check this out. He tosses me the canister, and I look it over. Some Super 8 reel, ostensibly of a family's camping trip to Yellowstone National Park in 1975, Most of our collection is newer than that, he says. We specialize in the area between 1990 and 2010. People submit things to us, we look them over, vouch for their authenticity, and put them in a database. Look here. He saunters over to the Commodore monitor and taps a key, and the thing springs to life, displaying the modern-day internet on a device which was manufactured before the internet existed. The site is tacky, with a nauseating color palette and a confusing layout. This is nice, but it's not what I came for. Do you have VHS tapes? VHS tapes. Do we ever? He lets out a manic guffaw and opens a massive bureau which is filled to the brim with tapes, all kinds, shapes, and sizes, even a section cordoned off for Betamax. It made my basement collection look like an anthill by proportion. I had once seen a documentary of a Los Angeles show hoarder whose closet was the size of a garage. What Ellis had going on here was nothing short of a madman's dream. There were so many of them that it would be impossible for one person to view them all in a lifetime. Mostly donated, like the rest of the archive, he remarks casually, and sniffles. His chin has stubble and he smells like hell. He checks his watch and squints because the only light coming in is from a window which is obstructed by 7 strips of flypaper, all of which hold wriggling death. I step into the bureau and look up and around, just trying to fit into my head how so many tapes could exist in one room. It is a difficult thing to envision. Well, listen, he remarks, I was about to go on my coffee break. Mind joining me? My treat. I look outside. My sedan seems safe enough out here. The rain clouds gathering way out look as if they're headed in the other direction, however the night still has a somber blue daguerreotype effect to it. Something about this room seems familiar. Maybe I see a little of myself in Ellis. Sure, I respond after a moment's hesitation, and this lanky freak and I step out onto the front porch which is barely one ledge and he locks up. One thing I do notice while we make our way to the souvenir street I spotted on my way in is how he keeps looking over his shoulder and gets more nervous the further we are from the building. After around 3 blocks I pick up this tick of his and check over my shoulder as well. Nothing but the cool waving branches of the maples and the scent of a backyard barbecue. It's an hour later now and the moon is on full display, and Ellis and I are discussing preservation techniques outside a small cafe with peppermint stripes on the awning and romantic neon lights on the windows. Ellis' peppermint mocha possesses a thin wisp of steam, my hot chocolate is cheap and sterile and what one would expect from a flavorless tourist trap like this, but it does offer insulation and comfort. Ellis continues to pretend that we're on the same ground, but he bited his nails and can never seem to hold eye contact with me for over a minute before glancing at the nearby alleyway, where an ivy-coated fence sits steeped in unseen mystery. Anything wrong? No. Well, he taps his fingers methodically on the satin tablecloth. Trouble, you know? Being the leader of an organization this large, it comes with a lot of responsibility. We get prank calls, we get nasty emails, we get straight up harassed. One guy threatened to report us to Congress, as if we were in violation of the Constitution itself. It's crazy sometimes. He takes a sip and foam collects near his philtrum, which is abnormally tall. All that about tapes and blog posts? What's there to get heated over? As I understand it, there's a fever of sorts. Look at you for instance. You've caught it. The obsolescence bug. You like old shit. You think it makes you fun and interesting to refuse to move on with your life. You sit stubbornly in the face of oncoming traffic. I'm the same way. My wife divorced me because I kept filming things. You know the morbid joke about the nut who witnesses a car wreck and can't help but film it? I was that guy. No joke. He points at an intersection about a block off, where a stoplight hangs from a wire and you can just make out the text on the green sign. He shakes his head and gulps down another foamy mouthful. I imagine this is a habit for him. Above us the rainbow-striped umbrella ruffles itself back and forth. It's a surreal visage. Right there, he says, deadpan sincerity. I was walking to the drugstore with my camera to get some film developed. This truck comes barreling down from over there, a Volkswagen Bug collides with it head-on and both the drivers are killed on impact. And I film it. I get every last detail. I actually pulled out my spare film, stuck it in the camera and pulled the film I was going to develop out, exposing it to the light. And then I went to the drugstore and got the photos of the crash developed instead. That's how deep into this I am. He sets the mug down, contextualizes his status as a citizen of this forgotten burg, and as the thoughts of these photos flood back a twisted rictus grin spreads like syphilis from ear to ear. He tilts his head so as to ask if I'm in on the gag. I just remain with my legs crossed in contemplative confusion. Point is, it's a sickness, he continues. You give man the ability to record absolutely anything, set it to paper, and he will. Sky's the limit. I remember when I got my first camcorder for my 11th birthday. My head exploded. I spent days and weeks just pointing it at shit, the sky, the ground, rocks. Just the idea that I had this magnetic power in my hands was enough to get me on a roll. Describes me to a T. As I speak, the interstate in the distance becomes a dazzling carpet of headlights and taillights, and beyond that the country fields whisper in rural platitudes. Ellis Mocha has now completely cooled as a sharp wind begins humming from the east. Now, with anyone else, that would be healthy, he continues after another lukewarm sip. But we're not like anyone else. You and I, we have the fever. Give us a camera, we will cling desperately onto the lens and the viewfinder and the aperture. It's not that we're self-absorbed, it's not ourselves we shoot, always. Sometimes we shoot things at angles which are incorrect, off-kilter, we capture things nobody else is willing to. And as you do this, you begin to realize that the world is far, far more expansive and vast than you ever could have imagined. As he says this, he pinches the tablecloth and holds it up, about a foot over the table. This tablecloth, and he displays it to me with his palm outstretched, to anyone else would be a tablecloth. You eat shit on top of it. However, to us, we understand that it is in fact woven from thousands if not millions of microscopic fibers, each with its own story to tell. The thread which holds the seam at the edges together also tells its own story. So many stories to tell, in everything. So little time. Finite, fleeting resources. But we do our best, try and document every little detail before it goes by, as if to show other people, to communicate with them, perhaps that on a galactic and minute scale, the world is incomprehensibly complex. Infinity is the sort of concept which would put Cthulhu to shame. Infinite possibilities, infinite unseen things, infinite inexperienced possibilities. Not just in the universe. Here on Earth, too. There is an infinity here on this planet, if you scale the focus in enough. His speech was relatively hypnotic and I had a difficult time following what exactly he was getting at. Okay, so picture this, he backs his chair up and spreads his arms wide, as if to make a point. You get your dream job. You are put in charge of archival efforts, the preservation of not only your own material, but the material of thousands. You are, in effect, a guardian of time. I was made owner and operator in 2018. The previous owners said very little to me, and I only heard from them sporadically on the phone. I had first been made aware of the archive in 2014, it was smaller then, but it had a dedicated following. Coming into inheritance of an establishment this important, it felt like winning a golden ticket. Dopamine floods the brain, impairs rational judgment. I spent the next few months after that fixing the place up, getting some new workers in. Couldn't pay them more than peanuts, really. But we did it. And for a while, every day was an exciting new voyage into the unknown. Combing the stacks, sifting through the calendar pages, rooting around in the hourglass. It sounds fantastic, I said, as he finished his drink and set the mug gingerly down. His hands were throttled with adrenaline and his eyes were beginning to flutter. The solitary wisp of hair swayed to and fro like a kite as the wind chill set in. Behind us, the lights of the cafe darkened and the man behind the counter walked out and locked things up for the night. Might want to get moving, he called out to us. Storm is on the way. We'll keep that in mind, I waved back. Ellis said nothing, only stared ahead blankly at the juniper-lined street, as if he were trying to recollect something from the deepest abodes of his cerebrum. Something wild and electric. I remember the first time I saw one of them, he exclaimed over the breeze, which was now dipping close to 30. Everything slows down, you get the same effect as a cassette where the heads are ever so slightly misaligned, such that one head spins faster than the other. The effect is slight, but it is noticeable. The tape isn't spooled in properly. Same with time, when the others make their appearance. I was lying awake at 2 in the morning, and the TV abruptly changed to static. I fidgeted with the remote, but I couldn't turn it back to the show I had been watching, and the volume wouldn't go down, either. While the static continued, and the noise and the shadows it cast on the ceiling sucked me in deeper, the ceiling fan above me began spinning on its own. Within a minute its blades were caught in a frenetic blizzard, and the TV grew well, I wouldn't say it moved closer, per se. The static obscured my vision, the room was drenched in a sea of uncertainty, and all of a sudden my mental patterns were divided into 3 like a shattered window pane. I was thinking 3 things at once and seeing 4 things, and none of my divided selves would ascertain which among them was the true me. As the noise grew to deafening heights and the fan consumed my field of vision, a hypnotic dervish, I let out a long, guttural scream. And it was then, I think, that the others came in. The others were 6 feet tall, if I remember correctly there were 2 of them. They had thin, hair-coated limbs, like arachnids, their faces were gaunt and pale, with Medusan glass eyes and featureless, thin lips. I wasn't able to make out much in my state. The closest comparison I could draw, though even this may not totally convey the utter and abject terror I felt when I beheld them, would be to the sick feeling a lot of people report when they view The World's Wound, by Burkhalter. Although, like I said, that may not be the best comparison. That work is about division of the psyche, whereas the others were of such unity and direct intent that I could feel them dissecting my mind, gradually unraveling my psyche, and I continued to scream, and then at last they spoke into my brain. I nodded. I had seen the piece in question at a local exhibition a few years prior. While the man leering from behind the corner had little effect on me, I could sympathize with whatever Ellis had gone through. He related these events with the utmost sincerity. Stories are powerful tools, implements which can have untold effects on someone's mental state. Whether Ellis' own experiences were genuine was largely irrelevant in his own way, he had lived them. As the street was engulfed in shadow and a torrent of freezing rain began pouring from the heavens, if it weren't for the canopy we were seated under, we would have been drenched. The luminosity of Ellis' eyes proceeded to fade in and out, like a light bulb with a short circuit. And then they became static. "We are the others. You must answer for what you have done, Ellis." The effect was so instantaneous I nearly fell over backward. His pupils and iris had been replaced by a constant stream of impenetrable cathode noise. He sat in his chair and slumped backward, and the mug slipped from his grasp and shattered into 100 fragments on the sidewalk, all while the neon sign in the window of the cafe blew sparks and he merely stared ahead with that projected face like a conduit of electricity. All while I slowly stood up and turned around, ready to dart. He caught what I was planning and lunged forward, clutching onto my lapel with an animal ferocity. The static dissipated and he put his face very close to mine, and with brute strength he gripped the sides of my head and forced me to make direct eye contact with him. His eyes were now only inky pools, devoid of energy or humanity, and his voice was like the noise a ghost freighter makes when it dashes against an atoll in the deep unseen hours. "They'll try and threaten you, you hear?" he shouted above the blistering cold. "They'll do anything to make you give up what you love, extinguish it, all for their stupid equations and calculations. You can't, you hear? You can't let them win. Remain strong." And with this last he folded back once more into his seat, entirely depleted, and without another word exchanged I stole back to my car and drove back to the city, and all the while I could only think of those static-filled eyes and the world I had unknowingly crossed over into. We were duplicates in many ways, Ellis and I. He lived in a simulacra of my own residence, a thin wispy shadow without form or substance. And if what he said had been on the mark, I would need every ounce of my resolve. I floored the pedal, and while the rain covered the highway in buckets and droves, I tore around the traffic, and like a lightning bolt at 80-90 miles per hour I tried getting as far away from that horrible place as I could. I needed sleep, and a prolonged recovery period from what I had just witnessed. Over the course of the next few days I contacted my loved ones to let them know that I might be leaving soon. Ellis had contaminated me somehow. He had alerted the others to my existence, a big red flashing alarm which wouldn't go away. I was marked, a target on my back, and as the days passed and I spent every waking hour in a gathering dread, I knew that they were very real and that they were closing in. I didn't have long now. It's difficult to describe the exact sensations. Isn't that what ultimately defines the process, intangibility? No. You know something is wrong, something is obviously wrong. Out of place. When I returned to my house that night, my wife seemed a million miles away, a small and insignificant presence, and the following morning over breakfast what she had said meant virtually nothing. I was contemplating the basement, all those tapes, those endless stacks of concentrated time, extract of the decades. I called my sister the day after that. She was having issues with her husband, she said, and as my encounter with Ellis had been the dividing line of my existence, I was now able to detect colors and tones to her voice which implied he had been messing around with some girl at the office. She had seen it coming, she said. Hadn't I seen it coming? I had to admit to her, outright, that I hadn't seen it coming, but now I did. I was tired, though, too tired to intervene, too weary and frail to become involved in terrestrial affairs. The world around me was changing, and even as she related her husband's infidelity, I became aware of the ways in which it altered itself. The walls and furniture began flickering into and out of hue and saturation, such that sometimes when I touched them they would attain a grayscale consistency, or wobble between like a poorly soldered circuit. And my vision went from a flawless 20/20 to an indistinct blur. Glasses did not help, and I would not under any circumstances make my failing vision apparent to my wife, because visiting an optometrist would have been a waste of time. The damage was irreversible, and perhaps this was the worst aspect of the process: the inevitability, the long and slow decline. Like cancer, the world unraveled slowly, and I was left to watch as the skies became a pale gray and the birdsong dried up, and even the taste of all food resembled sandpaper. There was one room in the house where my vision returned, and the color was impeccably vibrant, however. The basement. I spent hours watching my collection, revisiting my life, and in doing so it was as if I lived through the entirety of my life again on those tapes, as I had filmed and recorded every event for so many years. And I sat in my broken-down recliner and viewed my recordings for days on end, and my wife remained upstairs. She knew, of course, that my mental state was fragile, that my tapes were at this point perhaps the only thing I could utilize to maintain something resembling sanity, and so she kept to her own devices as I did to mine. Soon enough, whispers permeated the upstairs hallway, and if I was walking slowly enough I could make out small hints of their form in certain rooms at certain times of day, usually evenings. My home was now foreign and alien, a hostile environment where nothing was certain. As days bled into weeks I saw less of my wife and son. They were present, although I didn't notice them. They left me like phantoms, became impossible to touch or see, and the house felt more like an enormous mouth, with rows of dagger teeth. Something that would, in due time, digest me and escort me to somewhere beyond. I spent most nights awake in the recliner, viewing the tapes in a successive marathon, knowing that if I slept they would likely hold me in an asphyxiated grasp. I never once looked behind me, only straight ahead at the multitude raster images which seemed to project themselves outward from the television's glass and fill the room with noises and sights which were inaccessible for me upstairs, or anywhere in the outside world. And as I combed through the stacks I discovered more forgotten recordings which, logically, could not have been made by me, though given that I had long since abandoned reality and logic I paid little mind to their otherworldly subjects. In one, A group of young people sat huddled in a circle late in an autumnal cemetery, murmuring verses of an archaic language in unison, and I felt as if the tape were sucking me into it, such that if I were to speak to them they would respond to me as if I were a spirit, and though I said nothing they gazed up at the cloud-coated moon all the same, waiting for something to be said. One tape caught as its focal point dark glimpses of a kind of gaudy shag carpet which gave way to an infinitely recessing series of Escher staircases that defied gravity, an installation so immense that it could not have been constructed under the constraints of physics as we know them. This recording said little about its cameraman, who was only breathing heavily and occasionally muttered someone's name. Yet another tape consisted of choppy and extremely distorted commercialized promotional material for a lucrative institution in the military-industrial complex I had never heard of, which manufactured bizarre devices for utilization in some non-existent conflict. Shoving another tape into that accursed slot revealed a young man in a dust-caked garage. Behind him you could make out a sunlit suburban lane, although he was secluded in the bucolic afternoon shadow, fidgeting with what appeared to be an old camera. To the person filming he explained the mechanisms in the apparatus, the buttons one would press to achieve a given clarity and focus. Undoubtedly a fellow traveler of this insane thoroughfare. And then there was the final tape, a tape which only displayed a levitating male head with spectral blonde hair, his sockets the consistency of the cosmic microwave background, his skin more potent than the elephant's foot, and it occurred to me then that this entity, whoever it may have been, was the epicenter of the universe itself, a being older than time and space whose presence in these affairs was constant and unceasing. And then the screen went dark and I was left in a deeper fog than ever before, a noiseless and sightless hell. Only the small emerald vacuum fluorescent display of my VCR before me, and behind me stairs I would never again ascend, though they led to the kitchen they also led to nothing. And as such I remained stable with controlled breathing and an unflinching gaze, hoping that when they found me they would make my final interminable ordeal quick and painless. They emerged then, from the floorboards in the closet, and as the television set switched itself back on they huddled around me, and I was indeed as frozen and complacent as a cryonics patient, held captive by their collective will. The others swarmed in a nightmarish huddle from all sides and their gangly extremities connected like nodes of an interface. The static roared, a sizzling white-hot ocean in the inner sanctum. It spilled from the edges of the screen like liquid, poured onto the outlet and the power strip, all while they opened my jaws and a roar came issuing from them, my orifices seared as if pressed onto a grill, and their crimson stares were at all times directed upon me, ruby spotlights that would not be diverted, either through language or through will. I had none left to speak of. "We are here," came the silent whisper in deafening agony. "We are not to be erased, nor do we take kindly to interference. Theft must be resolved. Theft must be resolved. Theft must be resolved." Their ganglia intermingled and the static submerged us all in a deep buzzing sea, such that the liquid poured into my nostrils and my ears and I felt it, the voltage and the atomic equations, the sweet juice of substance, and through this veil I witnessed my VHS collection, consumed by flames, swallowed in its entirety by the licking tongues of an electrical hazard, reduced to ash in smoke. Utterly destroyed beyond recognition. The others held me in a vice, away from the inferno, such that all I could do was watch as my life's work, the pursuit which I had dedicated so much to, was decimated in the blink of an eye. I was dropped from a monolithic height and flew into the staircase, and I felt my respiratory system collapse as the polyethylene debris filled my lungs. With my last ounce of strength I dashed upstairs. The smoke was just like the static, it permeated every room and consumed every exterior. As my home ate itself, as the oxygenated fire turrets burst forth, I scrambled for the front door, and fell forward onto the lawn. The soft blades of grass welcomed me and I caught a short glimpse of my wife and son huddled in rags as they observed the spectacle. Then the paramedics picked me up and issued me several tests. "You're lucky you came out of there alive," said one, as the popsicle-colored rotating strobe light atop the ambulance illuminated a section of the second story which came crashing down in a deadly cascade. As many as 20 firefighters stood in formation, extinguishers in hand, Though their efforts were in vain, the others would not rest or cease the onslaught until our home had been completely destroyed, eradicated from existence, all memories and recollections absent, save as mental images. My sister approached me just as they were escorting me into the ambulance's rear doors. In her left hand she carried a small camera and a canister of film. I was still too detached from the immediate moment to instantaneously register what this meant. "I'm sorry about this," she said. "Sorry you had to be here to see it. How'd you get here?" She called me over, gesturing to my wife. "A few minutes ago. Told me I would need to bring the Polaroid and take a few snapshots, for when the insurance people get here." "That's good. I need to rest up now. It's been a long day. Will they drive over to your place?" "I'll probably drive them. You just rest." She walked off towards the smoldering wreckage and the paramedics gave me a few final instructions on how to stand and how to breathe. I sat down on the stretcher, surrounded by a forest of gas masks and gauze, and as they locked me in and the driver turned the ignition, I realized what would happen if my sister were to capture on film a house which, in order to maintain temporal equilibrium, had been erased. I began banging on the doors, begging for them to let me out and stop her, screaming at the top of my lungs for someone to come around to the back and unbolt the doors, but the ambulance had started by then and we were well past the driveway, sailing on at full speed with the popsicle-colored sirens blaring. It's been half a year now since she died. She was found beaten to death, and they suspect her husband, who even now is out there somewhere, on the run for a crime he didn't commit. I don't care much whether he's prosecuted or not. However, I do wonder how she felt in those final moments, if she was as terrified of reconciliation as I was. I realize now that perhaps they only spared me because they knew she would be the final element in the chain of preservation. She had always been an avid photographer,